Nathaniel Crow didn't knock. He never did. The door to the Boston boarding house flew open, so hard the hinges screamed, and the two women inside, Clara Bennett and her 4-year-old daughter Lily, barely had time to scramble off the bed before he filled the doorway. He was a large man, the kind of large that came from power and the absolute certainty that no one would ever stop him. He had a lawyer's coat and a butcher's eyes, and he looked at Clara the way a man looks at something he paid for and expects to still be sitting where he left it. "Thought you could run," he said. Not a question. A verdict. Clara stepped in front of Lily without thinking. That's the thing about mothers, some instincts don't need practice. If you've ever stood between something precious and something dangerous, you already know what was running through her body in that moment. And if you haven't, stay with this story. Because what Clara Bennett did next changed everything. Before we go further, if this is your first time here, subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. These are the stories that stay with you. Frontier lives. Impossible choices. Love built in the hardest places. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The advertisement had been Cole Whitaker's idea, and he'd hated himself for it from the minute he handed the paper to the man at the general store in Caldwell, Montana. It read simply, "Rancher, 38, seeks capable woman for partnership in frontier homestead. Hard work expected. Honest situation offered. Write to Box 14, Caldwell Post." He hadn't used the word wife because he couldn't quite stomach it. Hadn't used the word lonely because that was nobody's business. Hadn't mentioned that the ranch house had a roof that leaked in 2 places, that the south pasture fence had been down since September, or that the last hired hand had quit in November and not been replaced because Cole couldn't afford to replace him. He also hadn't mentioned that he hadn't spoken more than 40 words to another human being since Christmas, when the Hendersons from the next valley over had ridden through and left him a jar of preserved apples and a look on Margaret Henderson's face that was something between pity and worry. He'd written the ad because Margaret Henderson had handed him that jar of apples and said quietly, "Cole, can't keep doing this to yourself," and he hadn't had a single argument against it. That had been January. It was now the first week of March, and the letter he'd received 3 weeks ago sat on his kitchen table, read so many times the fold lines were white and soft. "Dear Mr. Whitaker, I am a woman of 32 years, in good health, with some medical training and experience managing a household. I am hard-working and do not expect comfort. I am looking for a fresh start in an honest place and believe I could be useful to you. I would be grateful for the opportunity. Sincerely, Clara Bennett." The letter had not mentioned a child. Cole found that out the hard way, standing in front of the Caldwell Stage Depot on a Tuesday afternoon with his hat in his hands and his expectations neatly arranged, watching the stagecoach door open and a woman step down and then immediately turn back and reach up to help a small girl climb out after her. The girl was maybe 4 or 5, brown hair, a blue coat that was clean but worn thin at the elbows. She had a cloth doll tucked under one arm, and she looked at Cole with the completely unself-conscious curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to be afraid of strangers. Her mother looked at Cole with something entirely different. She looked at him like she was calculating the distance to the next stagecoach and whether she had enough money to get on it. "Mr. Whitaker," the woman said. Her voice was steady. The rest of her wasn't quite, he could see it, in the way she held herself, the too careful stillness of someone who had learned to look calm, even when they weren't. "Miss Bennett," he said. A pause that lasted about 3 seconds too long. "This is my daughter, Clara," said Lily. Cole looked at the girl. Lily looked back at him. She pointed at his hat, which he was still holding, and said, "That's very dirty." It was. He hadn't thought about it. "Lily," Clara says, a quiet warning in her voice. "It is dirty," the girl said reasonably. Cole put the hat back on his head. He looked at Clara. "You didn't mention a daughter in your letter." "No," Clara said. "I didn't." "Why not?" She met his eyes. "Because then you wouldn't have written back." He stood there in the cold Montana air with the stagecoach driver hauling down 2 bags and a small trunk, and he tried to find a single thing wrong with that logic. Couldn't. She was right. He wouldn't have. "I can pay our own passage back to Billings," Clara said. Her voice hadn't changed. Still that careful steadiness, but something behind her eyes was doing something else entirely. "That's what you want. I understand." He looked at Lily again. The girl had crouched down and was examining something on the ground, a pebble or an insect, or whatever it is 5-year-olds find endlessly important in the dirt. She was humming something to herself. She didn't look scared. She looked like a child who had been moved around enough times that arriving somewhere new was just a thing that happened. That was the thing that got him. Not the mother's steadiness, though that was something. It was the child's complete, practiced nonchalance about being somewhere unfamiliar. That wasn't a child who'd had an easy life. "Load the bags in the wagon," Cole said to the depot boy. He put his hat back on his head and looked at Clara. "Come on, then." Clara blinked. "Just once, Mr. Whitaker." "I heard what I said." He picked up the small trunk himself because it was heavier than it looked, and he wasn't going to let a woman wrestle with it in front of the whole town. 2-hour drive. It'll be dark by the time we get there. He was already walking toward the wagon. After a moment, he heard Clara say quietly to Lily, "Come on, sweetheart," and then the sound of small boots on the frozen ground, hurrying to keep up. He didn't look back, but he listened to those boots, and something in his chest did something he didn't have a name for. The drive out to the Whitaker ranch took 2 hours and 11 minutes, and Cole counted every one of them. It wasn't that he was angry exactly. He'd thought he was angry when he saw the child, but sitting with it now, jostling along in the wagon with Clara on the seat beside him, and Lily wedged between them because the wind had picked up, and Clara had pulled the girl close, he realized it wasn't anger. It was something more like the feeling you get when you've been walking towards something for a long time, and then, right when you get there, you discover it's something completely different than what you thought. Not necessarily worse, just different. Lily fell asleep before they'd gone a mile, her head tipping sideways and eventually coming to rest against Cole's arm. He noticed when it happened. He didn't move. "She doesn't usually do that," Clara said quietly. "Sleep? Trust people that fast." Clara was looking at the road ahead, cautious, usually, with strangers. Cole didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. After another mile, Clara said, "I should have told you. In the letter." "Yes. I was afraid you wouldn't respond." "You were right." She turned to look at him then. He kept his eyes on the horse. "And now?" she said. "Now we're 2 hours from the nearest town, and I've got a leaky roof and 40 head of cattle and nobody to help me with either," Cole said. So Clara was quiet for a moment. "I can help with both." He glanced at her sideways. "The roof? I grew up helping my father on a farm in Ohio. I know how to use a hammer." A pause. "I also have some medical training. I worked with a doctor in Providence for 3 years before I came west." "What kind of practice?" "Injuries, mostly. Some illness." Her voice stayed level, but there was a carefulness around the word injuries that Cole heard and filed away without comment. "I'm useful. I want you to understand that. I'm not asking for charity." "I know," Cole said. She seemed surprised. "You do? You got on a stagecoach in Boston with a 5-year-old and rode for 4 days to marry a man you'd never met in a place you'd never seen," Cole said. "That's not what charity looks like." She was quiet for a long moment. The wind picked up, and he felt Lily shift against his arm, burrowing slightly against the cold without waking. "She's warm," Clara said softly. "Thank you for not moving." He had no idea what to say to that. So he just clicked at the horse and kept driving, and the Montana sky went dark around them, stars appearing one at a time the way they do out there, where there's nothing to compete with them. The ranch house was worse than Cole had thought to warn her about. He hadn't really thought about it until he was holding the lantern up in the doorway and watching Clara's face as she saw it. The main room had a table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, and a collection of iron skillets hanging on the wall that were the cleanest things in the space. The floor had gaps between some of the boards. The window on the north side had a piece of oilskin tacked over it where the glass had cracked and never been replaced. Clara stood in the doorway with Lily on her hip. The girl had woken up during the last stretch of the drive, groggy and quiet, and looked at the room. "Bedroom's through there," Cole said, gesturing at the door on the far wall. "The roof doesn't leak in there. That's the main thing." Clara set Lily down and walked over to the wood stove. She opened it, checked the damper, looked at the wood stacked beside it, turned around. "Do you have more wood outside?" "Yes, then it's fine," she said. "We've slept in worse." The way she said it, "we've slept in worse," was not a complaint. Just a fact, delivered plainly, and it hit Cole somewhere he wasn't expecting. Lily had already discovered the iron skillets and was carefully touching each one in sequence, like she was taking inventory. "These are good ones," she announced. "Lily," Clara said. "They are," the girl said, completely unruffled. "You can tell by the weight." Cole looked at his skillets, which he had never in his life thought about the weight of. "How do you know that?" "Mama taught me," Lily said. "She says the heavy ones hold heat better." He looked at Clara. Clara shrugged, a small, slightly tired movement. "She retains things." "I can see that." He showed them the bedroom, small, with a bed that was big enough for two if they didn't mind being close, which apparently they didn't, because Clara sized it up with the same practical eye she'd turned on the skillets and the stove and said it would do. He brought in their bags. He showed Clara where the water barrel was, where the extra blankets were kept, where the back door was, and how the latch worked. He was about to leave them to it when Lily said, "Mr. Cole?" He turned around. She was standing in the middle of the bedroom in her nightgown, which Clara had apparently gotten her into with efficient speed, holding her cloth doll. "Yes? Is this really our house now?" He looked at Clara. Clara was looking at the floor. "For now," he said. Lily considered this. "Okay," she said, and then she climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up, and appeared to go directly to sleep, with the certainty of a child who has decided a thing is acceptable. Clara stood by the bed and didn't look at him. "For what it's worth," Cole said from the doorway, keeping his voice low, "I meant what I said, about not being charity." Clara looked up. "Get some sleep," he said. "The cattle need moving before the temperature drops tomorrow. I could use an extra pair of hands if you're serious about the ranch work." She held his gaze for a moment. "I'm serious." "Good," he said, and he shut the door and went to his own cot in the small room off the kitchen that he'd been sleeping in since he'd stopped being able to face the bedroom after his wife died, and he lay there in the dark for a long time, listening to the windwork at the north wall of the house. He hadn't told Clara about his wife. There was no reason to. Not yet. But the house felt different tonight. He could hear Lily's small breathing through the wall, which should have felt strange and instead felt like something he didn't have a name for. He lay there and cataloged the roof repairs he'd need to do before spring, the fence posts he still hadn't replaced, the south field he'd been ignoring. He thought about the 40 head of cattle and the price of feed and the amount left in the bank, which was enough, but not comfortable. He thought about the way Lily had said, "These are good ones," with complete seriousness, about iron skillets she had no business knowing anything about. He fell asleep faster than he had in months. Morning came at 4:30 the way it always did on a working ranch, not as a suggestion, but as an obligation. Cole was up before the sun, the way he always was, and he had the stove going and the coffee starting before he heard any sound from the bedroom. He figured they'd sleep until at least 6. Maybe later they'd had a long journey and the girl needed rest. He figured wrong. At 5, the bedroom door opened and Clara walked out wearing a plain work dress and sturdy boots, her hair pinned back. She looked at him. She looked at the stove. She looked at the coffee. "I'll make breakfast," she said. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She was already moving toward the dry goods shelf, cataloging what was there with the same quick practical assessment she seemed to apply to everything. "Do you have eggs?" "Chickens are out back. They've probably laid since yesterday." "I'll get them." "How many hands are we feeding?" "Just us currently. I had a man through November. Haven't replaced him." Pause for just a fraction of a second. "Why not?" "Can't afford it right now." He poured coffee into a tin mug and held it out. "Spring goes well, maybe by summer." She took the mug without comment and handed it back. "You first. You've been up longer." Then she went out the back door before he could respond. He stood in his kitchen holding the coffee mug she'd handed back to him and felt, very distinctly, the sense that something had shifted in his house. It was disorienting in a way he couldn't quite categorize. He'd lived alone for 6 years. He knew exactly where everything was and exactly how his mornings went, and exactly what to expect from his own walls. And now there was a woman out back collecting eggs before dawn, and he was standing in his kitchen, feeling like a stranger in his own space. He drank the coffee. When Clara came back with 6 eggs in her apron, Lily was padding out of the bedroom in her nightgown, hair wild, doll dragging on the floor behind her. "You're up early," Cole said to her. "I heard the chickens," Lily said. She climbed onto one of the chairs at the table and sat up very straight, like she was attending a meeting. "Mama said we help." "Lily help by staying out of the way while I cook," Clara said. "I can stir things," Lily said. "You can stir things when I say you can stir things." Lily accepted this with dignity. She looked at Cole. "Do you have a dog?" "No." She considered this. "You should get one." "Lily, dogs are useful," Lily said, appealing to reason. "They help with the cattle. I read about it." Cole looked at this 5-year-old who had opinions about iron skillets and cattle dogs and said, "Where'd you read that?" "Mama has books," Lily said. "She let me look at the pictures. The dogs in the pictures looked useful." Cole looked at Clara. Clara was cracking eggs into the skillet with focused attention that was not entirely about the eggs. "I'll think about the dog," Cole said. Lily nodded. apparently satisfied, and went back to watching the cooking operation with the intensity of someone preparing to take notes. The first week was nothing but work, which was fine with Cole, because work was something he understood. Clara had not been lying about the hammer. He found that out the second morning when he was up on the barn roof checking the damage, and she appeared below him with a tool belt that had clearly seen real use, not the decorative kind, and called up asking what she could do. He had her hold sections while he worked, then had her try a section herself, and she knew what she was doing well enough that he stopped watching her and just watched the work. That afternoon, she restocked his medical supplies, which turned out to be a jar of horse liniment and a bandage roll that had seen better days, by going through her trunk and producing things she'd apparently traveled with: carbolic, clean cloth, splint material, and a small leather case with instruments in it. That's a lot of medical equipment for a mail-order bride, Cole said. I told you I had medical training, Clara said. She was organizing it on the shelf above the window with the oilskin patch. I wasn't going to come somewhere this remote without being prepared. Do you actually know how to use all of that? She looked at him over her shoulder. I set a broken arm in a moving carriage once. I've stitched more wounds than I can count. I delivered a baby in a farmhouse with no doctor present. A pause. I know how to use it. He believed her. There was something about the way she talked about it, flat and factual, not dramatic, that made it credible in a way that performance wouldn't have been. By the end of the first week, she'd fixed the oilskin window properly, reorganized the dry goods so Cole could actually find things, made something for dinner every night that was better than anything he'd made himself in 6 years, and not once complained about the cold, the isolation, the leaking roof, or the fact that their current arrangement was legally speaking not yet a marriage. Cole had been thinking about that. He hadn't brought it up. She brought it up on Friday evening, after Lily was asleep, sitting at the table with the lamp between them and her hands around a mug of tea she'd made from herbs she'd found somewhere. We should talk about the legal situation, Clara said. I know. I'm not asking for anything beyond what we discussed in the letters, she said. Partnership. A stable situation for Lily. I'm not expecting. What? She looked at the mug. I'm not expecting anything personal from you. I want to be clear about that. Cole looked at her. She was 32, and she'd been through something he didn't know what, but he could see the shape of it in the careful way she moved through his house, always aware of the exits, always checking where Lily was, always with that contained stillness that was the body language of someone who had learned to expect things to turn bad. Clara, he said. She looked up. Whatever happened back east, he said. It's not happening here. She held his gaze for a moment. He watched something move behind her eyes, not relief, exactly. More like a person who has been braced for impact, slowly unclenching. How'd you know something happened? She said. Because people don't leave home with a child, and not much else unless they have to. He turned his mug in his hands. You don't have to tell me what it was, but I'm not blind. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up the way it did every night out here, working at the walls and the roof, testing the structure. His name was Nathaniel Crow, she said. Cole kept his face neutral and his hands still. He was a man I worked for, she said, in Boston. He was. She stopped, started again. He decided that because he employed me, he owned me. When I tried to leave, he made it very difficult. When Lily was born, a stop. He used her as leverage. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't show it. I left anyway, Clara said. I saved money for 2 years without him knowing. I planned for a long time, and then one night I took Lily and I didn't look back. She looked at her tea. I don't think he's the kind of man who accepts that. The fire crackled in the wood stove. Lily was asleep in the next room, her breathing small and steady through the wall. Is Lily his? Cole said, keeping his voice level. Clara shook her head. Lily's father was a good man who died of fever when she was 2. Crow came after a pause. He never had any legal claim. He just believed he had power, which is sometimes more effective. Cole nodded. He sat with that for a moment. You're a long way from Boston, he said finally. Yes, Clara said. Montana's not an easy place to find someone. No, she looked at him. But men like Nathaniel Crow don't stop because something's difficult. They stop because something's more difficult than them. She said it without drama, just stating what she knew. Cole had the distinct impression that Clara Bennett had been measuring the danger of men her whole life, not because she was fearful, but because she was careful, and careful was what had kept her and her daughter alive. Get some sleep, he said. We've got the south fence tomorrow. Stood, picking up her mug. Then she paused. Cole. He looked up. Thank you, she said, for not sending us back. He watched her go into the bedroom. He sat at the table a while longer, listening to the wind, thinking about a man named Nathaniel Crow in Boston, who had decided that ownership was a thing you could just decide about another person. Cole had met men like that exactly once before. He remembered how that had ended. He'd buried the memory under 6 years of solitude and work and not talking, but it hadn't gone anywhere. He went to bed eventually. He lay in the dark and thought about the south fence, and the roof, and 40 head of cattle, and Clara's hands efficient with the hammer, and Lily's absolute conviction about cast iron skillets. He thought about a man in Boston with hired men and enough money to do whatever he decided to do. He thought, not here. Then he went to sleep. The minister came out from Caldwell 3 weeks later, which was as soon as the weather allowed. It was a simple thing. Clara wore her second-best dress, which was better than her work dress, but still plain, and Lily wore her blue coat because it was the nicest thing she had. And the minister was a thin man named Aldrich, who clearly had opinions about the speed of the arrangement, but kept them mostly to himself. "Do you take this woman?" "Yes," Cole said. Aldrich blinked. He hadn't finished the sentence. "Mr. Whitaker, I haven't." "I know," Cole said. "Yes." Clara made a noise that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so quickly controlled. She looked at the floor, and when she looked back up there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, something warmer and more uncertain at the same time, the way a person looks when they've been handed something unexpected and aren't yet sure what to do with it. Lily, standing beside her mother, watched Cole with solemn 5-year-old attention. When it was over, and the minister had said what he needed to say, and everyone had signed the paper, Lily tugged on Cole's hand. He looked down. "You said yes too fast," she told him. "Lily," Clara said. He did, Lily reasonably. The man didn't finish his sentence. "She's not wrong," Cole said. Clara pressed her lips together. Aldrich gathered his papers with the expression of a man who had decided this was not his problem. After the minister left, they had lunch. Clara had made biscuits, which Lily ate 3 of with the focused dedication she applied to everything, and then Cole went out to check the cattle, and Clara washed the dishes, and Lily sat at the table and drew something with a piece of chalk on the dark surface of the table, which Clara let her do, which told Cole something about how their life had been before they came here. He checked the cattle. He walked the south fence line. Came back when the light was going orange. Clara was at the stove. Lily was asleep in the chair, bent over her chalk drawing, apparently having fallen asleep mid-artwork. "She'll get chalk on her face," Cole said. "She's done it before," Clara said. He looked at the girl, asleep in his chair, chalk in her fist, the side of her face beginning to acquire a pale smear. He looked at Clara at his stove. "It's a strange thing," he said. "What is a house with people in it?" he said. Clara turned around. She looked at him for a moment. "Does it bother you?" He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. "That's what's strange." She turned back to the stove, but he saw it the way her shoulders changed, some tension releasing that she maybe hadn't known she was holding. He picked Lily up carefully. The girl stirred but didn't wake, just made a small sound and settled against his shoulder like she'd done it 100 times. Carried her to the bedroom and put her down on the bed and pulled the blanket up. Lily opened one eye. "Mr. Cole, go back to sleep." "Okay," she said, and she did. He stood there for a moment in the doorway, looking at this child asleep in his house, chalk on her face, cloth doll in the crook of her arm. Then he went back to the kitchen and sat down at the table and said, "What's for dinner?" And Clara told him, and they ate it, and outside the Montana wind worked at the walls like it always did, testing, probing, looking for weakness. The walls held. The first person to bring something to Clara wasn't a rancher or a farmer's wife. It was a boy named Eddie Marsh, 13 years old, who showed up at the back door of the Whitaker Ranch on a Tuesday morning in April, with his left hand wrapped in a cloth that had gone dark with blood. Cole was out with the cattle. Clara was in the kitchen, and she had the door open before the boy had finished knocking. "My pa's not home," Eddie said. His face was the gray-white of someone trying hard not to pass out. "And Mrs. Teller said you had medicine." Clara looked at the hand. She said, "Come inside," and that was that. She had him at the table in under a minute, the cloth unwrapped, the wound exposed. It was a bad one, a gash along the palm from a slipped adze, deep enough to need stitching. Eddie looked at it and made a sound like a small animal. "Don't look at it," Clara said. She was already at the shelf. "Look at the wall. Is it bad? It's fixable," she said. True. And also the most reassuring thing she was willing to offer, because she learned that telling people it's fine when it clearly wasn't served nobody. "This is going to sting." "How much?" "Enough that you'll want to say something your mother wouldn't like." He brought the carbolic. "So say it now if you need to." Eddie looked at the wall and said a word that would have gotten him boxed on the ear at home. Clara cleaned the wound without comment. By the time she had needle and thread out, he'd gone quiet in the way boys go quiet when they're determined not to cry. Jaw set, eyes fixed on a knot in the wallboards. "You said Mrs. Teller sent you," Clara said, keeping her voice even, keeping him focused on her words instead of what her hands were doing. "Which Tellers? The ones on the creek road?" "Yes, ma'am." "She said you helped her husband's back last month." Clara had Frank Teller had come in from the south field, unable to straighten up, a muscle in his lower back seized so badly he could barely stand. She'd spent an hour working it out and told him to stay off the horse for 5 days. He'd stayed off for 2 and then done exactly what she'd said not to do, and she'd heard about it through Margaret Henderson, who seemed to be the county's central relay for most information. "How's Mr. Teller's back?" Clara asked. "He says it's fine," Eddie said through gritted teeth. "Mrs. Teller says he's lying." "Mrs. Teller's probably right," Clara said. She got four stitches in clean and even, which she was satisfied with, given that the boy had flinched twice and she'd had to pause and wait. She dressed it, wrapped it, told him to keep it dry for a week and come back in 10 days. Eddie looked at his bandaged hand with something approaching awe. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing right now," Clara said. "Tell your father to come see me when he's back." The boy left. Clara stood at the sink and washed her hands and looked out the window at the Whitaker land, going gold in the sifter, and let herself feel something close to useful. It was a feeling she had not had in a long time. Word travels fast in a frontier community, which Clara had expected. What she hadn't expected was how it traveled not in straight lines, but in the sideways, diagonal fashion of small towns, where information bends around personalities and old grudges and lands somewhere you didn't anticipate. By the end of April, she'd seen 6 people for various complaints. A broken finger, a fever, and an old man named Haskell who lived 3 miles north and had no family nearby. A woman, Margaret Henderson herself, who came with something she described as a stomach complaint, and which turned out to be something else entirely. Something Margaret cried quietly about for 10 minutes before Clara told her what she needed to do about it and gave her the medicine she had and told her to come back in 2 weeks. Margaret Henderson wiped her face and said, "I didn't know you were a real doctor." "I'm not," Clara said. "I worked with one for 3 years. There's a difference." "Not out here," Margaret said, which was probably the truest thing anyone had said to Clara since she'd arrived in Montana. Cole came in from the fields one evening in late April to find a woman he didn't know sitting at his kitchen table with her infant while Clara examined the baby's ear. Stood in the doorway. Clara glanced up. "The coffee's on the stove," she said. "Give us 10 minutes. He got the coffee." He sat on the porch steps and waited. He heard Clara's voice through the open door, low and even, and the woman's voice, higher and worried, and then Lily's voice. Lily, apparently, had been in the room the entire time asking a question that Clara answered with 2 words he couldn't hear. The woman left after 20 minutes with a small wrapped packet of something. She nodded at Cole on the porch steps and walked to where her horse was tied, with the particular forward-leaning walk of a person who has been carrying a weight and has just been told it might not be as heavy as they feared. Cole went inside. Lily was at the table drawing something with her chalk. Clara was cleaning the instruments. "Ear infection," Clara said before he asked. "The baby. It'll resolve." She dried her hands. "I hope you don't mind that I've been using the storage room." "For what? To see people?" "I've been keeping it clean. I'll stop if you want me to." Cole poured more coffee. "Why would I want you to?" She looked at him. Some men would. He thought about that. "I'm not some men," he said, which came out flatter than he'd intended, but it was true enough. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know." And she went back to organizing the instruments, and Cole sat down across from Lily, who showed him what she'd drawn without being asked. Something that might have been a horse or a dog was genuinely difficult to tell. "What is that?" he said. "A dog," Lily said, "so you don't forget we need one." "Lily," Clara said. "We do," Lily said. Cole drank his coffee and thought that the ranch was in fact probably incomplete without a dog. He got one in May, a big gray mixed breed from the Harmon place, 2 years old with the working instincts the Harmon boy said he had, and a habit of leaning against legs he'd decided he liked. Cole wasn't sure about it till the dog herded 3 straying cattle back through a gap in the south fence without being told, just doing it because it was clearly the thing to be done, and after that Cole had no further questions. Lily named him Scout before they'd been home an hour. "Can't just name him without asking," Cole said. "I did ask," Lily said. "I asked him. He wagged." "That's not how." "Cole," Claire said. He looked at her. She had her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders were doing something. "It's fine," she said, muffled. He looked at the dog. The dog wagged. "Scout," Cole said. The dog's tail went faster. "Fine," Cole said. Scout became almost immediately the organizing principle of Lily's outdoor life. The dog followed her everywhere she went, which was worrying at first, because Lily had a 5-year-old sense of reasonable geography, which is to say almost no sense of it, and the ranch was not a safe place for a child who wandered. Cole had solved this problem in the first weeks by telling Lily clearly what areas were and were not acceptable, and backing it up with consequences severe enough to be believed, which he'd felt uneasy about, until he realized that Lily responded to clear, consistent rules the way all children do. When the rules come with reliable reasons rather than arbitrary authority, she followed them. With Scout, she didn't wander as much anyway. Scout was a herding dog, and he herded what was in front of him, which meant he kept Lily in a loose circle of about 30 feet under most circumstances, which was better than what Cole could have managed. Caught himself watching them, sometimes the girl and the dog from across the field while he worked, Lily's small figure and Scout's gray one, moving through the ranch in the particular way of a child who has decided somewhere is home. He hadn't lived with a child since his sister's kids had visited years ago, and before that not at all. He'd expected it to be disorienting. It was disorienting, but not in the way he thought. It wasn't the noise or the intrusion. It was the way a child changed the meaning of a space. The ranch felt like something different when Lily was in it. Not warmer, exactly, though that too. More like it had a point. Like there was a reason for the south fence to be sound, and the roof to not leak, and the woodpile to be stacked high enough. That was a thought he kept to himself. The first real trouble came from a man named Gerald Prentice, who owned the Mercantile in Caldwell and didn't like Cole and never had, for reasons that went back 6 years to a land dispute that had been settled legally in Cole's favor and emotionally not at all. Prentice started the talk. Cole found out about it from Frank Teller, who came by the ranch in early June, not for his back though. That was also discussed, but to relay something he thought Cole should know. "Prentice is saying things in town," Frank said. He was a big man, Frank, with a sunburned face, and the careful delivery of someone who knows the words might land badly. "About Mrs. Whitaker." Cole kept his voice level. "What kind of things?" "She's just some desperate woman who hit a bastard child to get a man to take her in." Frank looked at the ground. "Begging your pardon." Cole was quiet for a moment. He was aware of how his hands felt and made a deliberate decision about what to do with them. "What else? That she's been using your place to practice medicine without any real right to do it. Some folks in town are concerned." Frank looked up. "He's trying to get the county to do something about her clinic." "That's what I heard." "She doesn't have a clinic. She has a shelf with medicine on it." "That's what I said." Frank pulled at the brim of his hat. "Prentice is Prentice, Cole. You know how he gets when he decides something is his business." Cole thanked him and went back to work. He thought about Prentice while he fixed the last section of the Torth fence, working the post driver with the kind of focus that comes from having something specific to be angry about. He thought about the things Prentice had said: desperate woman, bastard child, and about the fact that Lily had been born to a man who had died of fever and had nothing to do with Nathaniel Crow and nothing to do with desperation, and about the fact that Clara had walked into his wrecked ranch and made it function better in 3 months than it had in 3 years. And he was damned if he was going to stand quietly while Gerald Prentice ran his mouth in the Caldwell Mercantile. He didn't tell Clara that evening. He needed to think first, which was usually his approach to things: gather the information, turn it over, decide what was worth doing about it. He told her the next morning, at breakfast, while Lily was outside with Scout. Clara's face didn't change much when he told her. She kept eating. Then she set her fork down and looked at the table for a moment. "I expected this," she said. "I know. Prentice isn't going to be the last one." She looked up. "I'm a woman who showed up with a child and started treating people in someone else's house. I knew people would have opinions. The people you've treated don't seem to have opinions. Eddie Marsh's father came by last week to leave half a side of bacon. He didn't look like a man with opinions." "The people I've helped are fine," Clara said. "People I haven't helped. That's Prentice's actual problem." Cole thought about that. "Meaning?" "Meaning there's a doctor in Caldwell," she said. "Dr. Hensley. He's been there for 8 years, and he charges what he charges, and he goes where he chooses to go, which is mostly the north end of the county where the money is." She picked up her fork again. "I don't charge. I go to the Creek Road in the South Valley. Those aren't his patients, because he never bothered with them, but that's not how he's going to see it." Cole looked at her. "You knew about Hensley." I found out about Hensley, she said. Second week I was here. Margaret Henderson told me. She ate a bite. I wasn't trying to step on anyone's territory. I was trying to help people who needed help. I know that. What are you going to do about Prentice? Cole picked up his coffee. I'm going to go into town, he said, and I'm going to have a conversation. Clara looked at him with the expression of a woman who has had the experience of men having conversations on her behalf that made things worse. Cole, not that kind of conversation, he said. He looked at her evenly. I'm going to go talk to the mayor about what you are and what you're doing and why the county should consider itself lucky. Stared at him. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, he said. Came out the same way she'd said it to him, that first morning with the coffee mug, and he saw the recognition cross her face. Stay here. I'll be back by afternoon. He went to town. The conversation with Mayor Birch was not elegant. Cole was not an elegant man, and Mayor Birch was primarily worried about not getting crosswise with Prentice, but Cole was systematic, and he laid out what Clara had done, and for whom and what the results had been, and he mentioned Eddie Marsh's hand, and the Kellerman baby's ear, and old man Haskell, who had been running a fever for a week before Clara caught what it was, and by the time he was done, Birch was nodding in the careful way of a politician who has decided to decide nothing, but has also decided to get out of the way. Prentice did not back down, but he also didn't get the county to do anything about the shelf of medicine on the Whitaker ranch. And eventually the talk quieted the way talk does, in small places, not because it stopped being said, but because enough of the people who were being talked about turned out to be more valuable than the person doing the talking. July came in hot and dry, which was bad for the pastures but good for the roof repair Cole had been putting off, and he spent 3 days up there with Clara handing things up when he needed them. They developed a rhythm without discussing it. She knew when to talk and when to be quiet, which was more than Cole could say for most people he'd worked alongside. On the second afternoon, while they were taking a break, sitting on the porch with water from the well, she said, without looking at him, "You didn't have to go talk to the mayor. You said that already. I know. I'm saying it again." He drank his water, and I'll tell you again that I wanted to. Why? He thought about it. The honest version, not the diplomatic one. "Because what you're doing is good," he said. "And I've spent enough of my life watching good things get stepped on by people who decided it was their business to stop them." He looked at the fields. "I'm tired of it." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The man who died." "Your wife?" Cole turned his head. "You mentioned it once," she said. "That you'd been alone for 6 years." I did the math. "I didn't mention a wife, no. But you also moved into the back room and left the bedroom empty, and you'd been alone 6 years, and the bedroom has 2 books on the table that aren't yours." She said it matter-of-factly, not unkindly. "I'm not prying, I noticed." He looked at the porch floor. "Her name was Helen," he said, "fever, winter of 69. He stopped. Started again. We'd only been out here 2 years. She hadn't wanted to come west, but she'd come anyway, because that's who she was. He stopped again. Clara didn't fill the silence. That was one of the things he'd noticed about her. She didn't fill silences to make herself more comfortable. She let them be. "She was better than me," he said. Plain truth of it. "She was better than this place deserved, and she died in it anyway." He turned his water cup in his hands. "I didn't know how to be here after that. So I just worked. For 6 years. And then you put an advertisement in the paper. And then I put an advertisement in the paper." Clara looked out at the fields. "I'm glad you did," she said simply. Not warmly theatrical about it. Not the performance of gratitude. Just the plain fact of it. He nodded. They sat with that for a bit. Then he said, "Your turn," which surprised her he could see it. "My turn for what?" "Tell me something that's true," he said. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that he didn't think she was going to answer. "I used to think that if I was useful enough," she said, "if I worked hard enough and made myself necessary, men like Crow would eventually leave me alone. 'Cause what would be the point of bothering someone who's just working?" She said it with a particular exhaustion that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. "It took me a long time to understand that men like that aren't interested in usefulness. They're interested in the act of having something, controlling of it." She looked at her hands. "I was a fool not to leave sooner." "You left," he said. "I did, with a child and not much else, to a place you'd never been." He looked at her sideways. "That's not the move of a fool." She was quiet. Then she made a short sound, not quite a laugh, but in the direction of one. "Tell me something else," he said. She looked at him then, surprised. "Something else? Something that isn't about Crow or Boston or any of that." He kept his eyes on the horizon. "Something just about you." She was quiet long enough that he thought she might refuse. Then she said, I used to make bread on Sunday mornings. Before everything. My mother taught me, and I did it every Sunday until I couldn't anymore. I haven't made it since. She paused. I miss it more than I'd expected. I have a good bread tin, he said. 2 of them. They were Helen's. Clara looked at him. If you wanted, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Sunday, she said. Sunday, he said. They went back to work on the roof. Below them, at the edge of the south field, Lily and Scout were moving through the grass in a wandering patrol, and Scout was doing his herding thing, keeping the girl in her 30-foot circle, reliable as a compass. The bread happened on Sunday. It was good bread, not perfect. Clara said she was out of practice, but it was good, and it made the kitchen smell like something. And Lily sat on the floor and fed Scout pieces of the burned edge of the first loaf, while Cole ate 3 slices without comment, and Clara said, You don't have to keep eating it if it's bad. And he said, I'm eating it because it's good. And she said, You've had 3 slices. And he said, Exactly. And she looked at him for a moment, and then looked back at the stove, and the bread kept coming, and the house kept being warm. That was the summer. There are things that build between people that don't have names for themselves while they're happening. Only later, looking back, that you can identify the moment, or usually several moments when something shifted, when it stopped being an arrangement and started being something else. For Cole, one of those moments was in August, when he came in late from the south field after a section of fence had gone down badly and taken most of his afternoon to fix, and he was tired in the bone-deep way that has nothing to do with drama and everything to do with plain exhaustion. And he came in the back door, and Clara had dinner on the table, and Lily was already eating, and Scout was asleep in the corner, and nobody asked him where he'd been, or what had taken so long, or whether he was all right. And it was the particular quality of that nobody, the relaxed, confident absence of needing to check on him, that did something to the inside of his chest. Like being known, like being the kind of person someone didn't need to worry about, because they trusted you to handle what you were handling. He sat down, he ate. He said fence on the south section, because Clara looked at him once with the quiet question that didn't need words. She nodded. The post at the corner, she said, same one. Been that post all summer, she said. I know. There's a way to reset it so it holds, she said. My father used to show me tomorrow, he said. She showed him tomorrow. Post held, that was the summer too. The letter arrived in the last week of August. Cole picked up the mail in Caldwell. Without particular attention, there wasn't usually much, and he was halfway home before he looked at it properly and saw the postmark. Boston. He didn't open it. He brought it home and set it on the table and looked at it for a moment. And then Clara came in from the storage room, where she'd been reorganizing the medicines, and she saw his face, and then she saw the letter, and she went very still. When did it come? She said. Today. She crossed to the table. She picked it up. She stood for a moment with it in her hands, not opening it, and Cole watched the stillness come over her, that particular controlled quiet that he'd seen in her that first day on the stage platform. The look of someone who has been braced for this exact moment for a long time, and had hoped not to have to use the preparedness. Then she opened it. She read it twice. Cole waited. He knows I'm here, she said. Her voice was level. He has a man in Billings. He says that Montana is a long way from a courtroom, but it is not a long way from hired men with enough time and enough money behind them. Cole said nothing. Clara set the letter down. She looked at it. He says he's coming to collect what he's owed. She looked up. He means Lily. The fire in the wood stove was burning low. Outside, he could hear Scout moving around on the porch. Somewhere further out, the cattle. The ranch sounds he'd learned to sleep through and wake for and read like a second language. He has no legal claim, Cole said. I know. A letter is not a legal document. I know, she said. Again, that patience. What does he actually want? Cole said. Is it Lily or is it you? She was quiet for a moment. He wants me to know that he can reach me, wherever I go. She looked at the letter again. He's done this before, with other people who tried to leave him. Her voice stayed flat. He's not about Lily. He never was. She's just the easiest thing to threaten. Cole picked up the letter. Read it. Set it back down. He's coming here himself? He said. He says so. When he doesn't say. She looked at Cole. He wouldn't. That's how he does it. You know it's coming, but not when. So you're always waiting. She stopped. I thought I was far enough away. You are, Cole said. She looked at him. Cole, I heard what I said, he said. Which was the same thing he'd said to her on the stage platform the day she arrived, and he watched her recognize it, and something in her face did something he hadn't expected, not relief, not gratitude, something more complicated than both. Something that looked like a person who has spent years carrying a weight alone and has just been told, for the first time by someone she actually believes, that they don't have to. You don't know what he's capable of, she said. You can tell me, he said. So she did. She sat down at his kitchen table in the last light of August, and she told him about Nathaniel Crowe in detail that she had not given the first time the men he'd used, and the things he'd done to people who had tried to stand against him, the legal maneuvers and the extra-legal ones. The reputation he'd built in Boston as a man who always collected on a debt, which was the word he used for everything. Even people, debt, as if a woman who had worked for him and tried to leave was something he was owed in return. She told him with the flat, precise tone of someone who has had to be honest about ugly things, enough times that the ugly has been burned off and what's left is just the facts, laid out without the drama of them. Cole listened to all of it. He asked 2 questions, both logistical. He did not look horrified. He did not look afraid. He looked the way he looked when he was fixing fence, or planning the cattle rotation, or working through a problem that had a solution focused, and patient, and already turning it over. When she was done, he said, the storage room. I want to make it properly yours. She blinked. What? The room where you see patients, he said. It needs proper shelving and better light, and a door that latches from the inside. He looked at her. I've been meaning to do it all summer. We'll start this week. Cole, did you hear anything I just said? I heard everything you said, he said. He held her gaze. And I'm telling you that Nathaniel Crowe can come to Montana if he wants to. He can bring whoever he wants. This is still my land, and you are still my wife, and Lily is still under my roof, and I don't take kindly to men who use children as threats. He said it plainly, without heat, which somehow made it more effective than shouting would have been. We'll build the room. We'll fix the latch, and if he shows up, we'll deal with him. Clara looked at him for a long moment, long enough that the fire in the stove burned lower, and Scout scratched at the porch door to be let in. You're not afraid, she said. I didn't say that, he said. I said we'd deal with it. He got up and let Scout in, and the dog came in and went directly to Lily's empty chair and sniffed it, and then settled himself under the table. Go check on Lily. She was asleep when I came in, but she's been coughing. Clara stood up. She moved toward the bedroom, then stopped in the doorway. Cole. He looked up. She stood there for a moment, like she was going to say something specific, and then she didn't. Just looked at him with those careful eyes that had been calculating exits since the first day. And in them, for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw the calculation stop. Good night, she said. Good night, he said. She went in. He stayed at the table. He picked up the letter from Nathaniel Crowe, and he read it once more. The whole thing. Every word. The way you read something when you want to understand the person who wrote it, rather than just the words. He read the space between the lines, the weight of it, the particular cruelty of making someone wait without telling them when. He folded the letter. He put it in his coat pocket, where he intended to keep it. He sat in the kitchen and he planned, quietly and methodically, the way he planned everything: the roof repairs, the fence lines, the cattle rotation, the spring planting. Thought about what Crowe had said and what Crowe had not said, and what a man with money and no scruples could actually do versus what he could actually be allowed to do when the land he was coming onto belonged to someone else. Thought about the community that had started coming to Clara's storage room shelf with their broken fingers and their fevers and their sick children. He thought about Frank Teller's back and Eddie Marsh's hand and the Kellerman baby's ear and Old Man Haskell, who had walked 3 miles in April with a fever of 102 because he'd heard there was someone at the Whitaker place who might help. He thought about what a man like Crowe would make of that, whether he'd bother to find out or whether he'd just arrive seeing a remote ranch and a woman and a child and believe it would be easy. Cole's jaw settled. Nathaniel Crowe was going to find out that Montana was not Boston, that a woman who had spent 4 months becoming necessary to a frontier community was not a woman without allies, and that a rancher who had spent 6 years alone had spent those years becoming very clear about what he was and was not willing to allow on his land. The fire had gone low. He banked it, put the guard on, blew out the lamp. In the dark, he could hear Lily breathing through the wall, small and steady. He could hear Scout shifting under the table. He could hear the wind outside working at the structure of the place the way it always did, testing every board and beam. The structure held, it always held. He came on a Thursday. Cole was out at the north pasture when Scout came running from the direction of the house, not the excited run of a dog who has found something interesting, but the tight, purposeful run of a dog who has decided something is wrong and gone to find the person who handles wrong things. Cole saw him coming across the field and stopped what he was doing. He was back at the house in 7 minutes. There were 2 horses tied at the front post. Neither of them was local stock. Cole knew every horse in the county by sight at this point, which was the things you learned when you lived somewhere long enough. These were Eastern horses. Well-fed, well-shod, not built for rough terrain. Kind of horses that belonged to men who hired their riding done. Cole came around the front of the house and found 3 men on his porch. 2 of them were the hired kind big, standing back, the particular posture of men who are paid to be present rather than to think. The third was Nathaniel Crow. Cole had constructed a version of Nathaniel Crow in his mind over the months since Clara had told him the name. He'd built it from what she'd described the power, the certainty, the ownership he believed was his by right. He'd expected something imposing, something that matched the weight of what Crow had done to Clara's life. What he found was a man of perhaps 50, on the softer side of well-built, with a coat that had cost more than Cole made in a good month, and the particular kind of face that comes from decades of being agreed with. Not ugly, not threatening in any physical sense. The threatening was all in the way he stood on Cole's porch, which was the way a man stands, in a place he has already decided is his. Clara was in the doorway, not outside it. She had the door at her back and her arms at her sides, and that stillness on her that Cole had learned to read as the body holding itself together through force of habit rather than ease. Lily was not visible. Cole hoped she was in the storage room. Crow turned when he heard Cole's boots on the steps. He took in Cole with the quick, dismissive assessment of a man who measures people against what he needs from them and discards the rest. "Mr. Whitaker," Crow said. He had a city voice, smooth and shaped. "I believe we have something to discuss." "You're on my porch," Cole said. He kept his voice even and his hands visible, which was a habit he'd developed over years. In places where visibility of hands meant something. "I don't recall inviting you. I came a long way." "That was your choice." Cole stopped at the top of the steps. He was the same height as Crow and 30 pounds less, and 15 years younger, and none of that was the relevant variable. What was relevant was that Crow was standing on Cole's porch in front of Cole's wife, and Cole was not going to move sideways for it. "What do you want?" Crow's mouth curved in the way of a man who finds the directness slightly charming and mostly contemptible. "Mrs. Whitaker and I have unfinished business." "Her name is Mrs. Whitaker," Cole said. "That tells you what you need to know about your unfinished business." Crow's eyes shifted to Clara. Cole watched him do it the way his gaze moved past Cole, as if Cole were a piece of furniture, and felt something tighten in his chest that he kept entirely out of his face. "Clara," Crow said, "you've done well for yourself. This is a fine." He paused, looking around at the ranch with the expression of a man being charitable about a situation he finds beneath him. "Arrangement." Clara said nothing. She was looking at Crow with a stillness that had moved past fear into something harder and colder. Cole had not seen that look on her before. He noted it. "I came to settle accounts," Crow said. He looked back at Cole, apparently deciding Cole was worth addressing after all. "Clara worked for me for 4 years. She left without notice, taking property that was mine." "She is not property," Cole said. "I didn't say she was." Crow smiled. "I said she took property, money, items from my household. The legal case is straightforward." "Then file it," Cole said, "in a Boston court, and see what a Montana sheriff thinks about jurisdiction when he reads it." Crow's expression shifted, just slightly, the surface charm thinning at the edges. "Mr. Whitaker, I understand your position. You married a woman in good faith. I respect that. But there are things about Clara you don't know, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I let you continue in ignorance. Everything I need to know about Clara's told me," Cole said. That landed. He saw it, the slight tightening around Crow's eyes, the recalculation. A man who uses information as leverage needs his information to be new to the person he's leveraging. "Has she told you about the money?" Crow said yes. "About the agreement she signed?" "There was no agreement," Clara said. Her voice came out steady and quiet. "There was a paper you put in front of me when I was 28 years old and frightened, and I signed it because I didn't know what it said, and you knew I didn't. My lawyer in Boston looked at it last year." Pause. "It's not worth the paper it's printed on." Crow looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes that was harder and less managed than anything he'd shown so far. "You contacted a lawyer," he said. "I did a great many things in the 2 years before I left," Clara said. "You weren't as careful as you thought. The silence on the porch had a new quality to it. The two hired men shifted their weight. Scout, sitting beside Cole's left leg, was absolutely still in the way dogs go still when something has changed in the air around them. Crow turned back to Cole. The charm was gone now, not replaced by anger, which would have been easier, but by a kind of flat assessment. Crow had rerouted and was looking at the situation again. "You're a practical man," Crow said. "I can see that. Let me make a practical offer. I have no interest in dragging your name through this. I have no interest in a long legal fight. I want what's mine, and then I'll go. Clara comes back to Boston. She works out what she owes, and in 6 months she can go wherever she likes. You get an annulment, which my lawyers can arrange cleanly. You lose nothing." Cole looked at him. "Think about what you're protecting," Crow said. "A woman who lied to you in her letter, who brought a child you never agreed to, who has been treating your neighbors like a physician when she has no license and no standing." He paused. "I know about the complaints. The doctor in Caldwell. The county records." Cole said it wouldn't take much. "Get off my porch." Crow blinked. "Mr. Whitaker." "I said get off my porch," Cole said. "Same volume. Same pace. You're on my land and you've had your say, and the answer is no. To all of it. Every part." He held Crow's eyes. "You ride back to Caldwell, and you take your men, and you get on the first stage east, and you don't come back. That's the only thing I'm going to offer you." Crow looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara, then back at Cole. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Crow said. "I've read your letter 3 times, Cole said. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." Crow stepped back. The hired men stepped back with him. There was a moment, the particular kind of held moment that can go several directions, and then Crow straightened his coat and put on the expression of a man who has decided to allow something rather than been forced to retreat from it. "I'll give you time to think," he said. "We'll talk again." "No," Cole said, "we won't." Crow walked down the steps. The hired men followed. Cole stood on the porch and watched them ride down the track toward the county road, and he didn't move until they were well out of sight. Then he turned around. Clara was still in the doorway. She was shaking, barely a fine tremor in her hands that she was working to control. "Lily," he said. "Storage room," she said. "I put her there when I saw them coming." She looked down at her hands. She didn't see any of it. "Good." He came to the doorway. "Clara." She looked up. "You did well," he said. Something broke a little in her face, not dramatically, just a slight fracture in the set of it, like a seam that's been held under pressure, finally finding a hairline release. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. "He'll come back," she said. "I know," Cole said. "Come inside." That evening, Cole rode to Frank Teller's place, and then to the Hendersons, and then to the Kellervins, which were the 3 neighbors he knew best and trusted most. Told them what had happened plainly and without elaboration. Frank listened with his arms crossed and his jaw working the way it did when he was angry. Margaret Henderson listened with the particular focused attention of a woman taking inventory of a situation. Ed Kellerman, who was a large, quiet man, who had said maybe 20 words to Cole in the 3 years they'd been neighbors, listened without expression and then said, "You want us to be around?" "I'd appreciate it," Cole said. "I'll bring my brother," Ed said. "He's been staying with us since June." Cole thanked them and rode home in the dark, Scout loping alongside the horse. The Montana sky was clear and enormous the way it gets in September, the stars brutal and close, and Cole rode through it, thinking about what Crow had looked like, on his porch, not frightening, was almost the problem. A frightening man you could respond to straightforwardly. A man like Crow, who was all leverage and patience, and the absolute conviction that everything eventually came around to what he wanted, that was a different kind of problem. When he got back, Clara was at the table with the lamp on, and papers in front of her. She looked up when he came in. "I wrote down everything I have," she said. "Every document, every name. The lawyer in Boston, paper he had me sign, the money I took and why I took it." She looked at the papers. "If he tries to file anything legal, it needs to be answerable." Cole sat down. He looked at what she'd written, careful, organized, the handwriting of someone who had learned to document things, because they'd learned that having proof was different from being right. "The lawyer in Boston," he said. "He's reliable?" "He was. He helped me because he'd had his own dealings with Crow and hadn't liked them." She paused. "His name is Alderman. I have his address." "Write to him this week," Cole said. "Tell him what's happened. Tell him Crow is in Montana." She nodded. "I will." She looked at the papers, then up at him. "Cole," what he said on the porch. "About the county, about my clinic. Prentice already tried that route," Cole said. "It didn't go anywhere. Crow is not Prentice." "No," Cole said. "He's not. He sat with that honestly. But you've been here 8 months, and you've helped about 40 people in this county. That's not nothing." Clara was quiet. "I've been thinking about that," she said, "about what he could actually do legally. He has no custody claim, no legitimate debt claim. What he has is money and hired men and the willingness to make life very unpleasant." She looked at her hands. "He does that. He makes things unpleasant until people decide you're not worth the unpleasantness." "Some people might decide that," Cole said. "Some won't." She looked at him with the expression she had sometimes when he said something that surprised her, not because it was surprising exactly, but because she'd gotten used to a world where the things she'd hoped for didn't materialize. "You have to know what you're agreeing to," she said. "If he comes back here with more men, if he makes trouble with the county." "Clara," he said. She stopped. "Stop trying to let me out," he said. "I don't want out." Her jaw tightened. She looked at the papers. "I just want you to—" "I know what I'm doing," he said. "Not impatient, just certain. I chose this. I'm not going to keep being told I don't know what I chose." The lamp burned between them. Outside, Scout was on the porch, his nails moving restlessly on the boards, the way he did sometimes when the weather was about to change. "Quiet and real." "Okay," Cole said. He got up and went to the window and looked out at the dark. "How much does Lily know?" "She knows there was a man Mom was afraid of back home," Clara said. "She's 5. She knows what fear looks like on me, which she's better at reading than most adults. She doesn't know his name or what he wants." "Keep it that way if you can," Cole said. "Kids her age carry things heavier than we realize." Clara looked up at him. It was not the first time he'd said something about children that revealed more than he'd intended, and she had never once pressed him on it. He appreciated that. "I'll keep it from her as long as I can," she said. They went to bed. Cole lay in his room off the kitchen and did not sleep for a long time, listening to the quiet. Crow had said, "We'll talk again." That was the tell, not a threat exactly, but a promise. Promise of a man who fully intended to wait until the most inconvenient possible moment, which was how men like that operated. Patience as a weapon. Cole had patience too. He'd spent 6 years alone in Montana learning it. Crow did not come back immediately, which was what Cole had expected. What he'd also expected was the things that happened instead. The first was a visit from a man named Willoughby, who introduced himself as a county assessor, which he may have been, but who was also asking questions about the Whitaker Ranch's water rights in a level of detail that no county assessor Cole had encountered had ever cared about before. Cole answered every question plainly and completely, and walked Willoughby to the property markers himself, because there was nothing wrong with his water rights, and he knew it, and by the end of it, Willoughby was making notes with the slightly deflated air of a man who has been sent to find a problem and found nothing. He rode away toward Caldwell. Cole watched him go and thought, "Crow." The second was that Gerald Prentice started talking again, louder this time, about Clara and the question of her licensing, and whether the county ought to look into a woman practicing medicine on a ranch. Cole heard about it from Margaret Henderson, who had stopped carrying news to Cole with the apologetic air she'd had at first, and now delivered it with the crisp efficiency of someone who has decided they're on a side. "He's got Hensley behind him now," Margaret said. She was at the table in Clara's storage room, which had the new shelving and the latching door and 2 proper lamps, and which looked, by now, like the kind of place a person came to with their problems and could reasonably expect those problems to be taken seriously. "Hensley's claiming you're undercutting him, which is rich, considering he's never set foot on the creek road in his life." "I haven't charged anyone," Clara said. She was reorganizing the medicine shelf with the focused calm she brought to all organizational tasks. "I know that," Margaret said. "Prentice knows that too. That's not what this is about." She looked at Clara. "There's a man staying at the hotel in Caldwell. Easterner. Big coat." Clara went still. "He's been there 3 days," Margaret said. "He's been talking to people. Asking about you, about the ranch." She paused. "About Lily." The last word landed differently. Clara set down what she was holding. She turned around. "He asked about Lily," she said. "By name," Margaret said. "I heard it from Edna Marsh, whose boy went to town for supplies. He was asking whether you had a daughter, what she looked like, how often she went to town with you." Clara walked to the door. She unlatched it and called across the yard. "Lily, come inside." Lily appeared from behind the barn, Scout at her heels, something in her hand that turned out to be a very interesting rock she'd found. She came in without argument, which meant she'd heard the tone in her mother's voice and recognized it. "Stay inside today," Clara said, and tomorrow Lily looked at her mother. Then at Scout, then she said, "Is it the man from Boston?" Clara crouched down. "Where did you hear that?" You and Cole talk at night sometimes, Lily said. She was 5, and apparently she heard everything. I don't always understand, but I heard that part. She looked at her rock. Is he coming here? We don't know, Clara said. But I need you to stay close for a bit. Lily considered this. Can Scout stay inside too? Yes. Okay, Lily said. She accepted this the way she'd accepted the move to Montana and the marriage and the leaky roof, with the self-possessed practicality of a child who has learned that the adults in her life will tell her what she needs to know and trust them to do it. She went to her corner of the kitchen with her rock and her dog and sat down. Clara stood up. Her face was composed. Beneath it, something else was moving, but she'd gotten very good at the composition. Margaret was watching her from the storage room doorway. What do you need? She said, Clara thought. I need Frank Teller to know, she said, and I need Cole home by midday. Cole was home by midday. He'd heard about the man at the hotel from Ed Kellerman's brother James, who had come into Caldwell for lumber, and noticed the Easterner, and put it together with what Ed had told him. James was 17, and observant in the way of young men who've grown up in places where you notice strangers, because strangers matter. Cole came home and listened to what Clara had heard from Margaret, and then he went to the map he kept on the wall, not a real map, more of a sketch he'd made years ago of the land around the ranch, the roads in and out, the neighboring properties, the geography of the place, and he stood in front of it for a while. Then he went back outside. He rode to Frank Kellerman's. He made 2 other stops he didn't mention to Clara that evening, which were to 2 men he knew who had been in places where trouble of this kind had been a professional concern. Not lawmen exactly. Men who understood the difference between what the law could do and what needed doing before the law got around to it. When he came back the second time, it was late and Clara was waiting. You've been planning, she said. Yes. Tell me, he told her. Not all of it. There were parts that she didn't need and that he didn't want her to carry, but the important parts. Who would be where and when and what the signal would be if something happened. He told her about the geography. The ranch sat at the end of a single-track road with open field on 3 sides and the creek to the north, which meant anyone coming onto the property was visible from a long way out. That was a thing Crow would not know and Cole did. Clara listened. She asked 3 questions, all practical. When he was done, she said, and Lily. If anything happens, she goes to the Tellers, he said. Margaret's already agreed. She goes with Scout and she stays there until I come for her. Clara looked at him. You've talked to all these people about our problem. They don't see it as our problem, Cole said. That's the thing about this county. I didn't understand it for a long time. I kept to myself so long I forgot. But Frank Teller's back. Eddie Marsh's hand. Haskell's fever. He looked at her. You made this your community. They know that. She was quiet. You spent 8 months treating people nobody else bothered with, Cole said. You didn't do it for a favor, but it turns out community is what's left when you've done things without expecting to be repaid. He pulled off his coat. That's the part Crow can't account for. He's accustomed to places where everything has a price, and you can buy or threaten your way to what you want. He doesn't understand a place where people show up because they want to. Clara was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. You believe that, she said. I believe it because I'm watching it happen, he said. She looked at her hands for a moment. Then, what do we do now? We wait, he said, and we're ready. Crow came back 9 days later. He came in the afternoon, which was different from what Cole expected. He'd thought early morning, when visibility was worst, but Crow apparently wanted to be seen. Came with 4 men this time instead of 2, and he came to the front of the house the way he had before, with the confidence of a man who believes his numbers are his argument. Cole was on the porch before they reached the post. He hadn't been waiting dramatically. He'd been fixing a hinge on the porch rail, which needed fixing, and he'd seen them coming a quarter mile out because of the way Scout had lifted his head. He finished tightening the hinge. He set the tool down. Then he stood up and waited. Crow rode to the front, pulled up, looked at Cole. He looked different from the first visit, less polished. He'd been in Caldwell 9 days, and small towns do something to city men who believe in their own importance. There was an edge on him that hadn't been there before. I gave you time to think, Crow said. I didn't need it, Cole said. Crow looked at the ranch. He was doing the math he'd been doing since he arrived in Montana. 4 men, 1 rancher, remote location, no help coming. He looked satisfied with the math. Cole did not look at the barn. He did not look toward the creek or toward the tree line to the north. Here's where we are, Crow said. He dismounted, which was the tell he'd decided they were going to be here a while. I've spoken with the county assessor. I've spoken with Dr. Hensley. There are questions about your water rights, questions about your wife's activities, and I have a legal document signed by Clara in 1TZen 871 that gives me certain claims that a court will need to sort out. Pulled a glove off one hand, which was a theatrical gesture Cole found irritating. Or we can settle this now. Clara comes back to Boston to answer for the money she took. Child stays with you. I have no interest in the child. 6 months and it's over. She's not going anywhere, Cole said. That's not your decision, Crow said. She's my wife, Cole said. On my land. That is exactly my decision. You're one man, Crow said. And then Frank Teller walked out of the barn. Crow turned. Frank was carrying nothing. His hands were at his sides. He was just standing there. But Frank was a large man, and he'd brought his son, who was 22 and built like his father. They stood at the barn door. From around the south corner of the house came Ed Kellerman and his brother James. From the north, coming down from the creek line, were 2 more men, the ones Cole had visited on the second evening, who had not been mentioned to Clara. Crow turned back to Cole. His face had shifted. The math had changed. These are my neighbors, Cole said. You should know that. One of Crow's hired men moved his horse sideways. Another looked toward the road. These were men who had been hired to be present for a manageable situation, and the situation had changed its character. Clara came out of the front door and stood on the porch. Crow looked at her. He looked at all of it, the men at the barn, the men at the south corner, the men at the creek, Cole between him and the house, Clara on the porch. He was doing the calculation again, and he was coming up with a different answer. This isn't over, he said. The legal documents Clara prepared 3 months ago are with a lawyer named Alderman in Boston, Cole said. He's been notified you're here. He knows your history with Clara. He has names and dates and copies of what she signed and what it's actually worth. Cole held Crow's eyes. The water rights question died when Willoughby actually looked at the deeds. Hensley's complaints are about market competition, not law, and Mayor Birch knows it. A pause. You came here with leverage. You don't have any. Crow looked at him. At Clara, back at Cole. People like you, he said. He said it flatly, like an observation. You have no idea how many times I've heard that before. How many small places full of people who stood together and thought it mattered. Did it, Cole said. Crow said nothing. Did it matter? Cole said again. Silence. Then Clara spoke from the porch, and her voice was the clearest thing on the property. I was 28 years old, she said. I was alone and I didn't have anyone, and I signed what you put in front of me because I was afraid. But I'm not 28 anymore, and I'm not alone, and I am not afraid of you. She held his gaze, and she didn't flinch, and her hands were perfectly still. Go home, Nathaniel. She used his first name. Cole heard it land. He watched Crow's face absorb it, the removal of the formality, the Mr. Crow that had always been the invisible acknowledgement of his authority. Nathaniel, just a man, just a name. Something went out of Crow's face then. Not defeat exactly. More like a recalculation reaching its final figure and not liking it. He looked at Cole. You have a problem with water in the north field, he said. Creek's running low. I know, Cole said. I've been managing it. That land in the north sector. It's going to be difficult to maintain. Cole looked at him for a moment. Crow was talking about the ranch. He was looking at the ranch, not at Clara, not at the men, at the land. Cole understood, with the slow certainty of a man who has learned to read what people actually mean underneath what they say, that Crow was looking for a way to leave that he could tell himself was strategy rather than retreat. The Northfield manages, Cole said. It's good land. Crow put his glove back on. He looked at one of his men, the one who'd moved his horse sideways, and something passed between them. The wordless communication of men who've worked together long enough to talk without words. Then he turned his horse. He didn't say anything else. He rode back down the track toward the county road, his 4 men following, in the particular order of a retreat that does not want to be called one. Cole watched them go, all the way to the turn, past it, until the sound of the horses was gone. Frank Teller came across the yard. He stopped beside Cole. He's not going to file anything, Frank said. That type doesn't file things they can't win. They just look for easier targets. I know, Cole said. You think he's done? Cole thought about it honestly. He thought about the look on Crow's face when Clara had said Nathaniel not angry, not determined, but for just a moment exposed. The look of a man who has operated for a long time in a world where his power is a given, and has encountered, perhaps for the first time in a long time, a place where it is not. I think he'll try something else, Cole said. But I think he'll try it at a distance. That's what men like that do when the direct approach fails. They go indirect. He watched the empty road, which means lawyers, which means alderman in Boston is more important than what just happened here. That's a longer game, Frank said. Yes, Cole said. But it's a game that can be played from here. Frank clapped him once on the shoulder and went back toward his horse. The other men were dispersing. The Kellermans heading south, James already moving back toward the creek line. Cole stood in the yard for a moment, looking at the road where Crow had gone. Then he turned around. Clara was still on the porch. Lily had appeared behind her. She must have heard the horses go and come out when it was quiet, and she was holding her mother's hand, looking out at the yard with Scout pressed against her leg. Clara's hand was around Lily's, and the two of them were standing there in the afternoon light, the girl and her mother, on Cole's porch. He walked back across the yard. He climbed the steps. Lily looked up at him with the serious, absorptive attention she brought to every significant thing. Is he gone? She said. Yes, Cole said. She considered this. Is he coming back? Cole looked at Clara. Clara was looking at him. I don't know, he said. Lily deserved the honest answer. Lily thought about it. Then she said, but we'll be ready if he does. Cole looked at this 5-year-old who had packed a cloth doll and her mother's courage and ridden 4 days on a stagecoach to the middle of Montana. Yes, he said. We will. Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back inside with Scout. Clara and Cole stood on the porch in the afternoon quiet. The road was empty. The fields were gold, with the particular gold of Montana in September, which has nothing gentle about it. It's the gold of a place that is about to get hard and knows it. You organized all of them, Clara said. It was not an accusation. It was something else, the kind of statement that is really a question about what it means. They organized themselves, Cole said. I just told them the time and place. She looked at him. The wind moved across the field and lifted the edges of her hair, which had come half loose from its pin. She didn't fix it. Cole, she said, yes. She started to say something and stopped. Started again. I wrote to Alderman yesterday, she said. The letter went out on the morning stage. Good, he said. It's not over, she said. I know, he'll try something else. I know that too, Cole said. He looked out at the fields. Cattle were moving slowly in the north pasture, scoutless today, managing themselves. Fence line was holding. The roof had held through the August rains and would hold through the winter if he got to the east section before November. The ranch was not fixed. It was never going to be fixed. Not completely, because that was the nature of a working ranch in Montana. Always something, always the next thing needing attention, but it was functioning. It was in the most important sense, sound. We'll deal with whatever he tries, Cole said. Same way we dealt with this. He looked at her. Together. She was quiet for a moment. Then she did something she had not done in all the months since she'd arrived. She reached out and put her hand on his arm, not dramatically, not as a gesture, just the way a person touches the arm of someone they trust when they want them to know it. She left it there for a moment. Then she went inside to check on Lily. Cole stood on the porch for a while longer, hand on the rail. Frank Teller had watched him fix the hinge on, looking out at the land that was his and that was theirs now, which was a different thing than his alone. Felt the difference between those two things with the plain, uncomplicated certainty of a man who has finally stopped arguing with what he wants. The wind moved through the grass. The cattle moved. Far down the road, there was nothing but road. Cole went inside. The letter from Alderman arrived in October, 3 weeks after Crow rode off the Whitaker property and back toward Caldwell and whatever came next. Cole brought it in from the mail run and set it on the table and went to find Clara, who was in the storage room with a woman named Ruth Grady from the South Valley, whose youngest had an infection in his foot that had been poorly treated before it got to Clara. He waited on the porch until Ruth came out, nodded at Cole, and headed for her wagon with the careful walk of a woman who has been given a plan and is already running through it in her head. Clara appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth. She saw his face. Alderman, she said. Come read it, he said. They sat at the kitchen table together. Clara read it once fast, then again slower. Cole watched her face. Alderman had been thorough. The letter ran to 4 pages, close written, the handwriting of a man who had been a lawyer long enough to be precise about language, because imprecision in his profession cost people things they couldn't get back. He had filed 3 separate complaints against Crow in the Boston courts. One related to the document Crow had had Clara sign, which Alderman characterized in terms that were almost contemptuous. One related to a pattern of conduct toward former employees that Alderman had apparently been building a case on for 2 years before Clara contacted him, and one related to a specific incident with a man named Pruitt, who had tried to stand against Crow in 1872 and had been systematically destroyed financially over the following 18 months. Alderman wrote that Crow had returned to Boston. He wrote that the complaints had produced sufficient attention that Crow's name was now in front of a judge who was not, as Alderman put it, a man Crow had managed to cultivate. He wrote that the document Clara had signed was unenforceable and that he had a notarized statement to that effect. He wrote that the immediate legal threat was, in his assessment, neutralized. He also wrote, in the last paragraph, that men like Crow rarely accepted defeat cleanly and that Clara should remain watchful, but that the tools available to Crow had been significantly reduced. Clara set the letter down. She sat very still for a moment. Cole waited. Then she put both hands flat on the table and looked at them. Her fingers were not quite steady. "It's not over," she said. "No," Cole said. "But Alderman's right about the tools. Can't come at you the same way twice. He'll find another way." "Maybe," Cole said. "Probably." He looked at her hands on the table. "But it'll be slower and smaller, and it'll have to go through lawyers, which means it goes through aldermen, which means we'll know before it lands." She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Lily came in from wherever she'd been, read the room with the accuracy she always brought to that particular task, and quietly went to sit with Scout in the corner without being asked to. "I've been afraid of him for 7 years, Clara said. Cole said nothing. "That's a long time to be afraid of one person," she said. She said it without drama, just the plain accounting of it. "When I left Boston, I told myself I was done being afraid. But I wasn't. I was just afraid from a distance." She looked up. "Standing on the porch when he was here, that was the first time I wasn't afraid of him." She paused. "I was angry. That was different." "Anger's useful," Cole said. "It is," she said. "I'd forgotten." She picked up the letter again and read the last paragraph once more. Then she folded it and set it beside the lamp. "I want to write to Alderman," she said. "Tell him what happened here. The detail of it." "Write tonight," Cole said. "I'll take it in tomorrow." She nodded. Then she looked at Lily in the corner, who was pretending to be deeply absorbed in Scout's ear, which she was carefully examining as though for scientific purposes. "Lily," Clara said. Lily looked up. "The man from Boston isn't coming back," Clara said. "Not right now." Lily processed this. "Not right now," she repeated, which was not quite the same as never, and she was 5 years old, and she heard the distinction. "But maybe later?" Clara glanced at Cole. "We'll be ready if he does," Cole said. Which was what he'd said on the porch after Crow left, and Lily recognized it, and she nodded with the solemn practicality of a child who has decided that this answer is sufficient. "Okay," she said, and went back to Scout's ear. October moved into November the way Montana falls always did, not gradually but decisively, as if the land had made a decision overnight and implemented it by morning. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 4 days. The north field went hard. Cole got the last of the winter preparation done on the borderline of being too late, which was also how he'd done it every year since he'd been on this land, because there was always one more thing that took longer than expected, and one more thing after that. This year the difference was that he wasn't doing it alone. Clara had taken over the winter provisioning with the same organized efficiency she brought to everything, and she'd done it better than Cole had managed it himself, which he acknowledged without particular pride injury, because it was simply true. She'd been laying in supplies since August, had negotiated a better price with the feed merchant in Caldwell by committing to a regular arrangement, and had organized the root cellar with a system Cole didn't fully understand, but which meant he could find things in it for the first time in years. On the first real cold night, when the temperature went below freezing and the wind came off the mountains with genuine intent, Cole came in from the barn to find the kitchen warm and the stove loaded and something on it that smelled like the kind of food that makes a cold night feel like it has been specifically arranged. Stood in the doorway for a moment. Clara was at the stove. Lily was at the table with her chalk and a piece of dark board she'd started using instead of the table surface because Clara had told her once, with more weariness than anger, that the chalk on the table made it look like the work of a person with no sense of where things belonged, and Lily had accepted this correction and sourced the board from somewhere in the barn without further discussion. Scout was under the table. The lamp was on. Cole took off his coat and hung it. He washed his hands at the basin. He sat down. "How's the north shelter?" Clara said without turning around. "It'll hold," he said. "The east wall needs work in spring." "I'll make a note," she said. She made notes. That was another thing. She kept a small ledger of things needed, and things done, and things in progress, which she'd started in September and which had become, without anyone deciding it, the official record of what the ranch was and what it needed to be. Cole had seen his father keep a ledger like that. He hadn't done it himself since Helen. Lily was drawing something that appeared to be a horse, or possibly a dog, or possibly a horse-dog hybrid she had invented for purposes known only to herself. She showed it to Cole without preamble. "That's Scout as a horse," she said. "Scout as a horse," Cole said. "He'd be better at herding if he was bigger," Lily said. "He does fine as he is, I know," she said. "But imagine." Cole looked at the drawing. Scout as horse had a tail that was aggressively too large. "You've given him a very dramatic tail," Cole said. "He's dramatic," Lily said. Scout under the table thumped his real tail against the floor as if aware he was being discussed. Clara set plates on the table. She sat down. They ate. Cole would have eaten anything by that point, but what was on the plate was good, a stew of the kind that required forethought and that he had never once managed to produce for himself in 6 years of trying. He ate most of it and mopped the last of it with bread, which Clara had been making every Sunday since that first week, and which had gotten better each time, not dramatically but steadily, the way things get better when someone keeps trying. "Margaret Henderson came by today," Clara said. "About her?" "No, that's resolving. She came to ask if I'd look at her husband's knee. He took a bad step on the creek crossing and it's been swelling." Cole poured more coffee. "Can you help it?" "Depends on how bad the swelling is," she said. "Told her to bring him in tomorrow." She ate. "She also told me that Prentice has stopped talking." Cole looked up. "Apparently his wife came to see me last month," Clara said, "for something she didn't want to discuss with Dr. Hensley." She paused. "I didn't think she'd told him about it. She seemed like she wanted it kept private, but he knows." "Apparently." Clara looked at her plate. "She told him I'd been kind about it, that I hadn't made her feel ashamed. She said it without satisfaction, just factually. He doesn't want to be on the wrong side of that, I think." "Prentice loves his wife," Cole said, "whatever else he is." "Yes," Clara said. "People are complicated." Lily had finished eating and was looking between them with the interested attention of a child at an adult conversation she is technically too young for, but has decided she is old enough to observe. "Lily," Clara said. "I wasn't going to say anything," Lily said. "You were thinking loudly," Clara said. Lily considered this. "Mrs. Henderson is nice," she said. "She gave me a cookie last time we went to town." "She is nice," Cole said. "And her husband limps," Lily said. "I noticed that in August. You should have looked at his knee in August." Clara looked at her daughter. "How do you know about his knee?" "He holds that leg different when he walks," Lily said. "Costs him something." She went back to her drawing. "I notice things." Cole looked at Clara. Clara was looking at Lily with an expression that was part exasperation, part recognition, part something else entirely. "You notice things," Cole said to Lily. "Mama taught me," Lily said, which was the answer she gave for most of the things she knew, and which Cole had come to understand was not just credit-giving. It was accurate. Clara noticed the world around her with the focused attention of someone who had learned that attention was a survival skill, and she had passed that attention to her daughter the way you pass tools, not by instruction exactly, but by use. Robert Henderson's knee was not a clean problem, which Clara told him plainly when he came in the next day. Swelling was old as well as new. There'd been damage in that joint for some time, probably years, and the creek crossing had aggravated something that had been building. She could manage the swelling. She could tell him what not to do, which he would resist, and what would help, which he would do imperfectly. Could not undo 6 years of a joint that had been used hard and rested rarely. Henderson was a practical man. He absorbed this without complaint. "Can I work?" he said. "Limited," she said. "No heavy lifting for 2 weeks. No creek crossings on foot. The cattle need—" "Your son is 20, Clara said. "Let him." Henderson made the face of a man being told something he knows is true and resents. "My son is 20 and thinks he knows everything." "Probably doesn't," Clara said. "But he can cross a creek without aggravating his knee, which is what matters right now." Henderson looked at his knee, which Clara had wrapped with the efficient competence she brought to physical work. "How much?" he said. "Nothing," Clara said. Same answer she always gave. "Clara, you fixed 2 fence posts on our north line this summer that weren't your responsibility," Clara said. "And you brought a cord of wood in September without being asked." She began putting her instruments away. "We're settled." Henderson looked at her. He was a man of approximately 60, sun-rude, with the broad hands of someone who had worked land his whole life, and he looked at Clara the way people sometimes looked at her when she did the accounting differently than they expected, with a slight recalibration. Like she'd said something in a language he thought he knew, and it turned out he'd been mispronouncing it for years. You know, he said, when Cole first said he'd sent for a wife, I thought, well, he stopped. What did you think? Clara said. Figured he'd get someone young and not too bright who'd last a winter, and leave in spring, Henderson said, with the bluntness of a man who has decided that honesty is the only useful currency at his age. No offense. None taken, Clara said, which was more or less true. I was wrong, he said. You were, she said. He laughed a short, genuine sound. My wife likes you, he said. That's the real test. Margaret doesn't like anyone who isn't worth liking. I like her too, Clara said. He put his hat on and stood, testing the knee carefully. You should charge something, he said. Not because you need to. Because people respect what has a value attached. People respect what helps them, Clara said. In my experience, the bill is a separate conversation. He made a sound that wasn't quite agreement, but wasn't disagreement either, and went out. Clara stood in the storage room for a moment after he left, looking at the shelf, which had grown considerably since Oskist people had started bringing things. Not money, but things, a jar of honey from the Morrisons, 2 bolts of cloth from Edna Marsh, whose husband ran the dry goods end of the Marsh operation, a side of cured pork from a family on the East Road whose daughter's fever Clara had broken in September. The shelf had started as a ledger of what she had. It had become something else. She stood there and thought about what Henderson had said. You should charge something. She'd heard it in various forms from various people. She understood the argument. She also understood, in a way that was harder to articulate, that the clinic she was building, if it could be called a clinic, which was still a generous term for a storage room, with good shelving and proper latches, was only possible because she had come in without price. People on the Creek Road, the families in the South Valley, Old Man Haskell, these were not people who came easy to asking for help. They came because the door was open and the cost was comprehensible. Think about it. She always thought about it. What that meant for the future, whether there was a future that looked more formal than a shelf and a latch, whether Montana needed more than she was doing, or whether she was already at the edge of what one person could sustain. Turned off the second lamp and went back to the house. The second letter from Crow arrived in December. It was not what Cole expected. It was 2 sentences, written in Crow's smooth city hand on heavy paper. I have instructed my lawyers to withdraw the complaints filed in relation to Mrs. Whitaker. I consider the matter concluded. Cole read it twice. He read it a third time, looking for the angle, because there was always an angle with men like Crow, and a letter that was only 2 sentences was either the simplest thing in the world or the most complicated. Took it to Clara. She read it and was quiet for a long moment. Alderman happened, she said. The Judge Alderman mentioned Crow's had dealings with him before. Not good ones. She folded the letter and the Pruitt case. Alderman said there were other people Crow had done this too. They're all talking now. He cut his losses, Cole said. Cut his losses, she said. It's what he does when the cost outweighs the gain. She set the letter on the table. He'll have found someone else by spring. Someone who doesn't have an alderman. Cole said nothing. That was probably true, and it was also not his problem to fix tonight. Clara, he said. She looked up. Is it over, he said. Not rhetorically, he meant it as a real question. Asking her, because she knew Crow and he didn't, not the way she did. She thought about it. He could see her being honest with herself about it, not giving him the reassuring answer, but the actual one. For us, she said, I think so. He got too much visibility. He doesn't like visibility. She looked at the letter. For other people, he hasn't done yet, no. She paused. But for us. Yes, I think it's over. Cole picked up the letter. He walked to the wood stove and opened it and put the letter in and watched it go. Clara watched him do it. That's that, he said. That's that, she said. Christmas was Lily's idea, or at least the scale of it was. Cole had been going to let the day pass the way he'd let it pass, for the last 6 years acknowledging it, doing nothing particular about it. But Lily had started talking about Christmas in November with the focused intention of a child who has decided something is happening and intends to make it happen. And by early December, the intention had become sufficiently concrete that Cole had found himself, without quite knowing how he'd gotten there, driving into Caldwell to acquire a specific type of ribbon that Lily had described in enough detail that the woman at the general store had known exactly what she meant. Clara had watched all of this with the expression she wore. Sometimes when Cole did something that revealed him the slight widening of attention, the small, careful thing behind her eyes that she didn't name and he didn't ask her to. You didn't have to, she said, on the evening he came back with the ribbon and several other things he'd also acquired. 6. He said, She'd had a birthday in November, which they'd also done something about. Christmas. You hate going to town, Clara said. I don't hate it, he said. I just don't like it. Came home from the last 3 trips, looking like you'd done something unpleasant. Town is unpleasant, he said. That doesn't mean I hate it. There are unpleasant things that are worth doing. He set the packages down. Where is she? In the barn with Scout, Clara said. She found a cat. There's been a cat in that barn for 2 years, Cole said. How is she only finding it now? She found it 3 weeks ago, Clara said. She's been visiting it every day since. She hasn't asked to bring it inside yet, but she's going to. She's definitely going to, Clarissa said. Cole looked at the packages on the table. He looked at Clara. Helen and I used to fight about Christmas, he said. Came out without much preamble, which was the way most things about Helen came out, not planned, just surfacing. She wanted to do a lot. I thought it was too much work for one day. Clara was quiet, listening. She was right, he said. It was worth the work. He picked up his coat. I'll go tell Lily to come in for dinner. He went out. Clara stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking at the packages on the table, the ribbon, and whatever else he'd brought back from town that he hadn't itemized. Then she started dinner. Christmas turned out to be the warmest day Cole had spent in 6 years, which was not a dramatic thing and didn't need to be. Lily was pleased by the ribbon and by the other things, and she was also pleased by the cat, which she had quietly brought in from the barn on Christmas morning, on the theory that it was cold outside and the cat ought to be inside. And Cole had looked at the cat and looked at Scout, who was looking at the cat with professional uncertainty, and said nothing. Cat's name, Lily informed them, was Margaret. You can't name a cat after Mrs. Henderson, Clara said. I'm naming her after the color, Lily said. She's gray. Margaret is a gray sort of name. Clara looked at Cole. Cole looked at the cat. It is, he said. Clara pressed her lips together. Fine, she said. Margaret the cat walked under the table and sat beside Scout with the serene self-possession of a cat who has decided a situation is satisfactory. Scout looked at her. She looked at Scout. Some kind of negotiation concluded wordlessly between them. They ate. They sat by the stove. Lily fell asleep in Cole's chair, which had become, sometime in the fall, Lily's chair by common acknowledgement, with Scout under it, and Margaret the cat on the arm of it. Cole sat on the other chair, and Clara sat at the table, and the lamp burned between them. Tell me about Helen, Clara said. Cole looked at her. It was late enough that they were both tired, and the tiredness had the effect of making things more possible to say. What do you want to know, he said. What she was like, Clara said. You've said things here and there, but I don't have a picture of her. He thought about it. She was impatient, he said. Not in a bad way, in the way of someone who sees what something could be and doesn't want to wait for it to get there. She was always about 6 steps ahead of where we actually were. He turned his coffee cup. When we came out here, she was the one who had the plan. I had the land and she had the plan. I thought it was my idea to come west. I'm not sure anymore. Clara looked at him. You miss her? Yes, he said. Different now than it was. He thought about how to say it. The first few years it was like a wound. You know it's there all the time. Now it's more like a scar. You know it's there. It changed the shape of things. But it's not bleeding. Clara nodded. She would have liked you, he said. Clara looked surprised. Do you think so? She liked competent women, he said. She had strong opinions about incompetence. He drank his coffee. She would have had opinions about your clinic. She would have said you should charge for it. Henderson said the same thing, Clara said. Henderson is often right. He just says it poorly, Cole said. He looked at the sleeping Lily. She would have liked Lily especially. Clara was quiet for a moment. I think about what Lily doesn't have sometimes, she said. A real history here roots in a place. She paused. She doesn't know her father's family. They're in Ohio, and we have no contact with them. She doesn't know. She stopped. She knows this place, Cole said. I know, Clara said, but sometimes I think about what I took from her when I left Boston. Continuity. The continuity in Boston was Nathaniel Crow, Cole said. She absorbed that. Yes, she said. I know you gave her the barn cat and the dog and the bread on Sundays and the chalk on the board, Cole said. And whatever else is next. He looked at Clara. That's not nothing. She looked at him across the table. The lamp was burning low. Lily breathed slowly in the chair. No, Clara said softly. It's not nothing. January was brutal in the way only Montana January can be, which is to say comprehensively the cold not just in the air but in the ground, and the wood of the walls, and the iron of the tools, and the particular quality of the dark, which was a dark that seemed to have weight to it. Cole spent most of January outdoors doing what January required, which was constant maintenance of systems that the cold worked to undo. Cattle needed daily attention. The water supply needed keeping unfrozen. The barn needed checking every morning for structural integrity in the wind. There was no day off. There was no morning that allowed itself to be slept past. He came in from these mornings red-faced and functioning, and ate whatever Clara had made, which was always hot and always calibrated to someone who has been outside in the cold for 3 hours, and he did not take this for granted, which was one of the ways he had changed since March. Clara had started something in January that she hadn't quite defined yet. She'd written 3 letters, one to a medical college in Chicago, one to a doctor in Billings she'd heard of through the regional network of medical gossip that seemed to function remarkably well for a territory this size, and one to a woman named Dr. Evangeline Cross, who had been practicing in Colorado for 6 years, and was apparently the kind of person other medical people mentioned when they were trying to explain that something was possible. Cole knew about the letters because she'd told him, briefly, and he'd said, "Good," which was his response to most of what Clara decided to do. She'd looked at him like she was expecting more. "What?" he said. "Most men would have something to say about it," she said. "Most men are not me," he said, which was the same thing he'd said when Prentice started talking, and which she recognized, and it served the same purpose it had then. The letter from Dr. Evangeline Cross arrived in February. It was long, 3 pages in a handwriting that was extremely efficient and paid no attention to margins. Dr. Cross had apparently looked into Clara's situation through a contact she had in Boston. She didn't say how and had opinions. She thought Clara should formalize. She thought the storage room on a ranch in Montana was not the end point of what Clara could do. She laid out 3 specific options with the direct practicality of someone who considers clarity a virtue and diplomacies a time-wasting luxury. Clara read it at the table. Cole sat across from her and did not read it. He waited. When she looked up, she had an expression he'd seen before only a few times, and each time it was the same, the expression of a person who has been told something they already knew and has been waiting to hear from someone external in order to believe it. "She wants to meet," Clara said. "When?" "She's coming through Billings in April." She set the letter down. "She says there's movement toward formal certification for women in medical practice. In 3 states so far. Montana is—" She paused, looking at the letter. "She says Montana is the kind of place that doesn't wait for other places to decide things for it." Cole looked at her. "What do you want to do?" "I want to meet her," Clara said. "Then we'll go to Billings in April," Cole said. She looked at him. "You'd come?" "Someone has to drive," he said. "Cole?" She said it with enough weight that he understood she was asking something different from whether he'd drive the wagon. "I'd like to meet her," he said, which was true. He was curious about a woman who wrote 3 pages with no margins and had opinions about the future of medical practice in Montana. It seemed like the kind of person worth knowing. "And I'd like to see you talk to someone who thinks what you do is worth formalizing." Clara looked at the letter again. "It's a long way from a storage room and a shelf," she said. "You've come a long way from Boston with a 5-year-old and a cloth doll," Cole said. "The storage room is not the thing that was going to stop you." "Up. I've been watching you for almost a year," he said. "I know what you're capable of." He said it the way he said things he meant plainly, without decoration. "Question isn't whether you can do it. It's what shape it takes." Clara folded the letter and held it. Outside, the February wind was doing what February wind did in Montana, which was reminding the landscape who was in charge. Stove was going. Scout was under the table. Somewhere in the back of the house, Lily was having a conversation with Margaret the cat. "Cole," Claire said. He looked at her. She said it without preamble. "I love you." He had not been expecting that. Not tonight, not this way, not in the plain declarative sentence of someone reporting something true they've known for a while and decided it was time to say out loud. He sat with it for a moment, the words settling. "I know," he said. She laughed. "Short reel, you know." "I've known for a while," he said, and he looked at her across the table, in the lamplight, in the February kitchen with the wind outside, and the dog under the table, and the cat somewhere in the back with Lily. He looked at the woman who had fixed his roof and run his cattle and stocked his root cellar and built something in his storage room that people rode 3 miles in bad weather to get to. He looked at the woman who made bread on Sunday mornings and told him true things and had stood on his porch and called a dangerous man by his first name and not flinched. "I love you," he said. "That's the and." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You said it in the wrong order." "I said it in the order that fit," he said. She looked at the table, and the look on her face was something he wanted to keep. Not capture, he wasn't a sentimental man exactly, but keep the way you keep the knowledge of a thing. The way you keep knowing that the south fence is sound, and the roof holds, and the north field will come back in spring. Some things you just know and carry forward. April, she said. April, he said. They sat in the kitchen together. The wind worked at the walls. The stove burned low, and Cole got up to load it, and when he sat back down, Clara had refilled both cups from the pot on the back of the stove without being asked, because she'd learned his patterns the way he'd learned hers, which was what happened when you lived alongside someone long enough with your attention on. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, bed-headed with the cat under her arm. Margaret was cold, she said. Margaret is a cat, Clara said. She has fur, cold fur, Lily said. She looked between her mother and Cole, with the perceptive assessment of a child who has walked into a room where something has shifted and is reading the room. Is everything okay? Yes, Cole said. You both look different, she said. We're the same as we always are, Clara said. Lily looked at them for another long moment. She looked at Cole specifically, with the particular focus she'd had since the first day on the stage platform, when she'd told him his hat was dirty. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. She came into the kitchen, deposited the cat on her chair, and climbed up beside it. Can I have some warm milk? It's nearly midnight, Clara said. I know, Lily said. I couldn't sleep because of the wind. Clara got up to warm the milk. Lily sat in her chair with Margaret in her lap, looking at Cole. Cole, she said, yes. When the weather's better, can we get another dog? Lily, Clara said from the stove. Scout gets lonely, Lily said. Scout has a cat, Cole said. A cat is not a dog, Lily said. No, Cole said, it's not so, Lily said. Cole looked at this 6-year-old who had arrived on his porch in a blue coat with a cloth doll and a completely unself-conscious certainty about cast-iron skillets, and who had in the intervening year acquired a dog and a cat and a chalkboard and an absolute confidence that the ranch was hers, and the people on it were hers, and the future was a matter of logistics rather than doubt. We'll see, he said. Lily accepted this with the wisdom of a child who has learned that we'll see from Cole means yes, and from Clara means possibly, and from both of them together means the conversation is over for tonight. She drank her warm milk. She carried Margaret back to bed. Scout followed without being called. Clara sat back down at the table with the lamp between them and the letter from Doctor. Evangeline Cross in her hand and the February wind pressing at every seam in the house, finding nothing to get through. She said again quietly. April, Cole said. The house held. It had always held. April came the way it always did in Montana, not gently, not with any particular announcement, but with the sudden insistence of a season that has been waiting long enough and is done waiting. The snow pulled back from the south-facing slopes first, then the fields, and the creek ran high and loud with it, and the cattle moved differently in the new air. And Cole noticed all of it, the way a man notices the land he has worked long enough to read. He also noticed that Clara had been up before him 3 mornings running, which was unusual. He found her at the table each time with the lamp on, and papers in front of her, notes, lists, the careful preparation of someone who is getting ready for something important and is not going to walk into it underprepared. Billings was 4 days away by wagon. They left on a Tuesday, which was the day Clara had arranged with Margaret Henderson to look after the storage room and with Frank Teller's eldest boy to handle the cattle. Lily came with them because there had never been any question of Lily not coming. She had heard about Dr. Cross for 2 months and had developed opinions about her based entirely on the letters which she had asked to have read to her 3 times, and she intended to meet her. Scout stayed with Frank. Margaret the cat stayed with no one in particular, being a cat, and would manage. The road to Billings was not a comfortable road in April. It was the particular discomfort of spring travel in Montana, which is mud and cold and sun in combinations that give you no credit for the trouble. The wagon handled it. Cole handled it without complaint because it was simply the work, and Clara sat beside him on the bench the way she had that first night on the drive from the stage depot, except that everything about her, sitting beside him, now was different from that first night, though the shape of it from this outside might have looked similar. Lily slept in the wagon bed the first day, woke up the second morning with questions about Billings that neither Cole nor Clara could fully answer, spent the third day teaching herself to braid a length of leather cord she'd found in the wagon, with the focused, self-sufficient industry that was her primary mode of being. She never gets bored, Cole said quietly, on the 3rd afternoon. No, Clara said, she never has. She watched Lily in the wagon bed, the cord getting more complicated by the hour. When she was small and when things were hard in Boston, she would sit and make something for hours, whatever was available. paper string, she paused. I used to think it was just a way to pass time. Now I think it was how she stayed sane. Cole thought about that. She's going to be formidable, he said. She already is, Clara said. I'm just hoping she gets formidable in directions that don't give me gray hair. Too late, Cole said. Clara looked at him. I'm 33. There's one, he said. Just there, at your temple. Put her hand to her temple with the expression of a woman who knows she's been got and is deciding how to respond to it. Eyes on the road, she said. He put his eyes on the road. Corner of his mouth did something. Dr. Evangeline Cross was not what Cole expected, which he acknowledged later was probably his own failure of imagination. He'd constructed someone severe from the margin-ignoring handwriting and the direct opinions. What arrived at the Billings Hotel dining room was a woman of about 45, compact and quick-moving, with the kind of face that had probably never spent much time worrying about what it looked like, because it was too busy thinking. She was wearing a coat that had seen more use than a social call required, and she shook Cole's hand first, which he noted, and then Clara's, and then she looked at Lily. You must be the one with opinions about my letters, she said. Lily, who was not thrown by directness because she practiced it herself, said, You don't use margins. Margins are wasted space, Dr. Cross said. She sat down. What did you think about what I said? Lily thought about it. Thought you were right about the certification, she said. If you do things without a paper saying you can, people can always say you can't. Dr. Cross looked at Clara. How old is 6? Clara said. She's right, Dr. Cross said. She unfolded her napkin. She's entirely right. Now let's talk about what we're going to do about it. What followed was 3 hours that Cole mostly listened to, which was fine with him. He was not the subject, and he knew it, and he was not the kind of man who needed to be the subject. He drank coffee and ate what was in front of him, and listened to 2 women talk about the future of medical practice on the frontier with the particular intensity of people who have been waiting to have this conversation with someone competent and have finally found one. Dr. Cross had spent 6 years in Colorado building something that she described as a practice, but that sounded, from the details, more like a one-woman institution traveling, training, documenting, writing letters to medical schools and legal offices and territorial government offices with the persistent patience of someone who understands that systems change slowly but do change. She had worked with 2 other women doing similar things in Wyoming and Kansas. She was building, she said, not a revolution, which always collapsed, but a record, a body of documented work that made it progressively harder to argue that women could not do this because here was the evidence, case by case, year by year, that they could and did. Montana is behind, she said. Not as behind as people think, but behind. The certification process is possible, but it requires filing with the territorial office and the backing of at least one established physician. She looked at Clara. Do you have a physician who would back you? Not in Caldwell, Clara said. Hensley would not. No, I assumed Hensley would not. Doctor. Cross had clearly looked into Hensley. There's a man in Helena named Doctor. Birch, not your mayor. Different man who has backed 2 women in the last 3 years. I'll write to him. She made a note with the efficiency of someone for whom notes were the primary infrastructure of everything. Process takes 6 months minimum. Probably 8. Keep doing what you're doing in the meantime, and I'll work the legal end. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Why are you doing this? Dr. Cross looked at her. Because someone did it for me, she said simply. In 1868, a woman named Dr. Ruth Calloway in Philadelphia told me the same things I'm telling you, and filed the same letters on my behalf that I'm filing now. She put the cap back on her pen. She died in 1871. She didn't see most of what she built. That's the work. You build it anyway. Clara sat with that. Cole watched her sit with it. 8 months, Clara said. Give or take, Dr. Cross said, and then you have a paper that says you can. Which means Hensley has no argument, Prentice has no argument, and the next county assessor who comes looking for problems goes home empty-handed. She looked at Lily, and by the time this one's grown up and decided what she wants to do, the paper will already exist. Lily had been following the entire conversation with full attention. She looked at Dr. Cross. I'm going to be a rancher, she said. Good, Dr. Cross said. The frontier needs more of those too. Lily considered her. You're very practical, she said. I am, Dr. Cross said. So are you from what I can see? She stood up. Same time tomorrow. Bring the documentation you have. All of it, she left. Cole looked at Clara. Clara was looking at the space where Dr. Cross had been, and the look on her face was the one he'd seen in February. When the letter arrived, the expression of a person who has been told something they knew and has finally believed it. 8 months, he said. 8 months, she said. Lily was looking at her mother with the assessment of a child who reads adult faces for information. Mama, she said. Yes, are you going to cry? No, Clara said. Your face looks like crying, Lily said. My face is fine, Clara said. Picked up her coffee cup. Eat your dinner. Lily ate her dinner. Under the table, she found Cole's hand and held it for a moment. The way she did sometimes not for comfort, exactly, but as a form of communication. He held it back. She let go and went back to her food. They drove home in better weather than they'd driven out in, which felt like the land making a concession. The mud had dried on the road. The creek had dropped slightly. The fields on either side were beginning to show the first thin green of spring grass, which in Montana you never took for granted because it had been earned by everything that came before it. Cole drove and Clara sat beside him, and Lily sat between them. It was how they'd ridden back from everything, from Caldwell, from the Henderson place, from the Kellermans, from every errand and every emergency. The three of them on a bench seat in the particular arrangement of a family that has been made rather than assigned. That was the thing about this kind of family. Cole had come to understand. The assigned kind, the one you're born into, the one you expect, you don't choose it, so you don't know what you'd choose. This one had been chosen, every part of it, by each of them, in their own way and in their own time. Clara had chosen to write a letter to a man she'd never met. He had chosen not to send them back. Lily had chosen to fall asleep against his arm on the first drive home, which was the most trusting thing a child can do, and she'd done it without ceremony. Scout had chosen who he herded. Even Margaret the cat had made a choice of some kind, in the cat fashion when she'd walked into the kitchen and decided it was sufficient. You choose what you stay for. That was the thing no one told you about family, that the choosing never stops, it just gets quieter. Every morning Cole chose to get up and work this land and come back inside to these people was the choice again. Every morning Clara chose to open the storage room door and see whoever showed up was the choice again. Every morning Lily woke up and added another entry to her ongoing inventory of the ranch and its inhabitants and its requirements was her version of the same choosing. The road came around the last bend before the Whitaker property, and Cole saw the fence line and the roof line and the barn, and something in him settled the way it always did when he came back from somewhere. He'd had that feeling about this land for years, the particular physical ease of returning to it. What was different now was that the feeling included the people inside it. Scout was at the gate before they'd reached it, having apparently heard the wagon a mile out. He ran alongside as they pulled up to the front, and Lily was over the side of the wagon before it had fully stopped, which was a habit Clara had told her to stop, and which she had not stopped. And Scout met her with the full-body enthusiasm of a dog who has been without his person for 4 days and has opinions about it. The house was intact. Frank's boy had done the cattle right. Cole could see the state of the north field from the gate, and it told him what he needed to know. The barn was closed up properly. The storage room door was latched the way Clara wanted it latched. Margaret the cat was on the porch rail, watching their arrival with the expression of a cat who has managed perfectly well in their absence and would like that acknowledged. She missed us, Lily said. She missed the warmth, Clara said. Same thing, Lily said. The letter from Alderman came in May, a short one this time. 3 sentences. Crow had settled the Pruitt case. He had paid a fine. He was, as Alderman put it in the dry, precise language of a lawyer who has watched a great many men recalculate their positions, unlikely to extend his reach into Montana again. Clara read it at the breakfast table. She folded it. She set it beside her coffee cup. Cole waited. It's done, she said. Not with triumph. With the particular quality of relief that comes not from victory, but from the gradual, quiet conclusion of something that has been costing you for a long time. Like a wound that has finally, without drama, closed. Yes, he said. She picked up her coffee. I'm going to write to Alderman and thank him, she said. And I'm going to send him something. He never charged me either. What are you sending? She thought about it. I'll figure it out, she said, which was the answer she gave when the right answer wasn't available yet, but would be. He'd learned to trust that answer. Lily came in from outside with dirt on her boots and Scout at her heels and the chalkboard under her arm. She looked at the folded letter beside Clara's cup. Is that about the Boston man? She said. Yes, Clara said. Is it over? Yes, Clara said. It's over. Lily looked at the letter for a moment. Then she went to her chair and opened the chalkboard and started drawing something that appeared, as her drawings often did in the early stages, to be either a horse Or a dog. Good, she said. And that was that. The way it is with children, they carry things until they don't have to anymore, and then they put them down and go back to whatever they were doing. There's no ceremony in it, just the setting down. Cole had been watching Lily do it for a year, and he still found it instructive. He thought about that, sometimes what it meant to put something down. He'd carried Helen's death for 6 years without setting it down because he hadn't understood that you could carry grief and still keep moving, that the carrying didn't have to be the whole of your life. He'd thought solitude was the only honest response to loss. He'd been wrong about that. What solitude had actually been was easier than the alternative, and he'd dressed it up as honesty to make it feel like a choice rather than a retreat. He wasn't retreating anymore. Summer came back. The second summer, the anniversary of things. The first anniversary of Lily arriving and telling him his hat was dirty. The first anniversary of the minister who hadn't finished his sentence. The first anniversary of Eddie Marsh's hand, which had healed clean. Cole had run into Eddie in Caldwell in June, and the boy had shown him the scar on his palm with the particular pride of a young man who has a story attached to his body. The first anniversary of Frank Teller's back, and Margaret Henderson's quiet conversation in the storage room, and the letter from Crow that had come in August, and the one from Alderman that had answered it. Storage room had changed. It was still a storage room on a ranch, still with the shelving Cole had built, and the latching door and the 2 lamps, but it had accumulated over a year the particular quality of a place that has been used seriously. The shelf was organized in a system that Clara could navigate in the dark. The instruments were stored properly. There was a chair now for the person being seen, and a second chair for whoever came with them, because Clara had noticed early that people came with someone more often than alone. The window had good glass in it. Cole had replaced the oilskin in April. There was a ledger, which Clara kept carefully, documenting every person she'd seen and what she'd done and the outcome, because Dr. Cross had told her that the documentation was the argument, and Clara had understood immediately. She'd seen 83 people in the first year. Cole knew because he'd looked at the ledger once, not from intrusion but from curiosity, and she'd seen him look and hadn't said anything, which meant it was something she wanted seen. 83 people, in a county where most of them had no other accessible care. 83 people across a range of complaints from broken fingers to difficult pregnancies to fevers to the particular category of things that people didn't say out loud but brought to her because she didn't make them. Say it out loud, which was a kind of medicine too. He thought about what Henderson had said. You should charge something. Thought about what Dr. Cross had said about the documentation. He thought about the 8 months which had turned into 7. Because Dr. Cross moved fast once she'd decided to move until the paper arrived. The paper arrived in September. Clara Whitaker, it said. Certified medical practitioner, Montana Territory. She held it for a long time. Cole stood beside her. He had been with her when the territorial rider brought it, and he had watched her open it and read it not say anything for long enough that he began to count seconds without meaning to. Then she said, "It's real." "Yes," he said. "I need to show Lily," she said. He went to find Lily, who was in the barn doing something with a length of rope and scout that had the character of an experiment. He said, "Come inside. Your mother has something to show you." Lily came. She read the paper she had been reading for a year with the aggressive pace of a child who has decided reading is the primary tool of understanding the world, and she looked at her mother. "Now you're official," Lily said. "Now I'm official," Clara said. Lily considered the paper. "Can I tell Mrs. Henderson?" "Yes," Clara said. "Can I tell Eddie Marsh?" "You can tell whoever you want," Clara said. "Eddie will care," Lily said, "because of his hand." She looked at the paper once more. "Should say Dr. Whitaker." "That's a different certification," Clara said. "You should get that one too," Lily said. She handed the paper back. "I'm going to tell Margaret." "Margaret the cat doesn't understand certifications," Clara said. "She understands tone," Lily said, and went back outside. Cole looked at Clara holding the paper. She was looking at it still, at her own name on it, at the thing she had built toward from the shelf, with carbolic and the clean cloth and the leather case of instruments she'd carried across the country in a trunk. Dr. Cross said the next step is possible in 2 years, Clara said. "If I continue the documentation and complete the correspondence course from the Chicago College." 2 years is not very long, Cole said. She looked up. "No," she said, "it's not." She looked at the paper again. "When I left Boston with Lily, I thought I was running away. I thought that was all it was, escape. Getting somewhere that wasn't where I'd been." She paused. "I didn't know there was a toward in it, too. I couldn't see that far. Cole said nothing. I see it now, she said. She looked at him. Because of this place. Because of you. She said it without the weight of a declaration. Just the weight of a true thing said plainly. I want you to know that. I know it, he said. I know you know it, she said. I'm saying it anyway. He looked at her, the paper in her hands. The woman who had stepped off a stagecoach in March with a small suitcase, and a 5-year-old, and a past she was still carrying, and a future she couldn't yet see. The woman who had fixed his roof and run his cattle and kept his ledger and opened his house to everyone who needed it and stood on his porch and faced down a man who had frightened her for 7 years and called him by his name without flinching. The woman he had chosen, morning after morning, without ceremony, in the only way it meant anything. Clara, he said. She looked at him. You were never running away, he said. You were just taking the long way toward. She was quiet. Her jaw moved slightly, the way it did when she was keeping something in. Then she folded the paper carefully and held it against her chest and looked out the kitchen window at the Whitaker land in September, which was going gold again the way it had when she'd first arrived. 1 year of gold, 1 winter, 1 spring, 1 summer. 1 paper with her name on it. I'm going to need a bigger room, she said. I know, he said. I've been thinking about the east side of the barn. Turned. You've been thinking about it? Since July, he said. When the Grady woman came from 12 miles out in August heat with her son's foot. He looked at the wall, through it, toward where the barn was. You need a proper room, proper light, space for someone to stay overnight if they need to. Clara stared at him. That's Cole, that's a significant build. Frank's son is looking for work, he said. Ed Kellerman's brother, too. James is good with framing. He turned back to her. Spring, maybe. After the ground thaws. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, You've been planning this since July, and you didn't tell me. I wanted to see if the paper came first, he said. She made a sound that was almost exasperation and almost something else. You are the most you do things, and you don't say anything, and then you just tell you when it's time to tell you, he said. That is maddening, she said. I know, he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The September light came through the kitchen window and lay across the table and the floor and the wall where Clara had put up 2 hooks for coats hers and Lily's, which were 2 hooks that had not existed before March of the previous year, and which were in the small accounting of how a house becomes a home, not nothing. Spring, she said. Spring, he said. Here is what was true about the Whitaker Ranch by the end of that 2nd year, and what is worth saying plainly because plain things deserve to be said. It was not a perfect place. The east wall of the barn still needed work. The north field ran thin in dry years. The road in was bad in spring and worse in November. Cole's temper was short when he was tired, which was often. Clara was not easy to argue with, which was most of the time. Lily had broken 2 of the iron skillets she'd admired on the first night, not through carelessness, but through the ambitious scope of a cooking experiment she had undertaken without permission. And Scout had eaten something in the Southfield Inn. June that had required Clara's attention for 3 days. None of it was smooth. None of it was the life either of them had planned, because Clara's plan had been survival, and Cole's plan had stopped after Helen, and neither of them had seen this coming when they were making the plans they'd been making. That was the thing about plans. They showed you what you thought you wanted, and then life showed you what you actually needed, and the gap between those 2 things was where everything real happened. Clara had needed safety. She'd found it, and then found that safety wasn't the end of the wanting, it was the beginning. She'd needed a place to be useful. She'd found that too, and then found that useful wasn't the whole of it. She'd needed someone who would stand beside her without calculating the cost first. She'd found that in a man who kept his counsel and his plans to himself until it was time to share them, which was maddening, and was also, she had come to understand, a form of love. Cole had needed to stop retreating. He'd managed it badly at first, and then better, and then well enough that retreating was no longer a habit he recognized in himself. He'd needed to understand that the capacity to lose something didn't mean you stopped building things. He'd needed, though he wouldn't have put it this way, a 5-year-old to tell him his hat was dirty and mean it as a greeting. Lily had needed what all children need to be chosen. Not tolerated, not managed, not worked around. Chosen. Cole had chosen her in the way of a man who doesn't make declarations not by saying it, but by driving to town for ribbon and learning her patterns and finding the right words at the right moments and being the person she ran to on the porch the day Crow came and the day the paper arrived and every ordinary day between, which were the days that mattered more than any of the dramatic ones. There is a version of this story that ends with a statement about how everything worked out, how the ranch thrived and the clinic grew, and the family prospered, and the past never reached them again. That version is not entirely wrong. The clinic did grow. The paper on the wall was followed in 3 years by a different paper with a different title. The barn's east side was framed in the spring by Frank's son and James Kellerman and Cole himself, working alongside them with the competence of a man who knew how to build things that needed to last. Lily got her second dog, which was called Pepper, and was considerably less disciplined than Scout, and which Lily trained herself over the course of a summer with the patient, methodical approach of someone who has decided a thing is possible and intends to make it so. But what is truer than the prosperity version is the simpler one. They kept choosing each other, day after day, in the ordinary way. In the mornings when the coffee was on, and the stove was going, and the work was ahead of them. In the winters when everything was hard and there was no relief from it. In the arguments that neither of them handled perfectly and that both of them worked to resolve, because they'd each decided the resolution mattered more than the being right. The greatest thing the frontier gave them was not survival, though it gave them that. It was not safety, though it gave them that too. It was the plain, daily, unspectacular understanding that love is not a feeling that arrives and stays on its own. It is a thing you do, over and over, in small, unglamorous ways, until it has built into something so solid that the winter wind finds no way through it. Cole Whitaker had spent 6 years believing that what he'd lost had taken with it his capacity to build anything new. He'd been wrong. What loss does when you let it is teach you what was worth building in the first place. Clara Bennett had spent 7 years believing that her job was to make herself small enough to survive. She'd been wrong. What she'd needed was not to be smaller, but to be somewhere that could hold her full size. And Lily had been 5 years old with a cloth doll and a blue coat and no idea what Montana was. And she had to a stagecoach and looked at a man with a dirty hat and decided, in the way of children who are paying attention, that he was going to be fine. She had, as it turned out, been right. That's the thing about children who pay attention. They often are.